Greetings, dear viewers. You're watching Monkey DFIC. We have prepared something special for you today. What if Odin adopted Luffy as Thor's brother and Asgard built him the ultimate pirate ship? Your likes and subscriptions keep this channel alive. If you enjoy our content, please show your support. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Rubber Prince. The cosmic storm tore across the sky of Asgard like nothing seen in 1,000 years. Lightning cracked in impossible colors, thunder rolled in patterns that made no sense, and the very air seemed to scream as reality itself ripped open. Thor stood beside his father on the observatory platform, hammer gripped tight. "What is it, father? An attack?" Odin's single eye narrowed as he studied the writhing tear in the sky. "No. Something else. A convergence of realms not meant to touch." The Bifrost pulsed beneath them, responding to the chaotic energies above. Heimdall's deep voice cut through the roar of the storm. "Something comes through. Something small." They watched as the cosmic wound spat out a tiny figure before sealing itself shut with a thunderclap that shook the golden city to its foundations. The figure, barely visible from this distance, plummeted toward the waters of Asgard's sea. Thor. One word from Odin was enough. Thor spun Mjolnir and launched himself toward the falling object. The wind whipped his hair as he rocketed across the sky, calculating the trajectory. Whatever had come through the rift was small, a child perhaps. He put on a burst of speed. 50 feet from the water's surface, Thor caught his first clear glimpse. It was indeed a boy, skinny, black-haired, wearing a simple vest and shorts. And he was, laughing. The boy spotted Thor approaching and stretched out his arms, literally stretched, extending impossibly like some sort of elastic, and shouted something lost to the wind. Thor's eyes widened as the boy's hands suddenly grabbed onto his cape. The momentum yanked Thor downward as the boy used him like a slingshot, redirecting his own fall. The boy rocketed past him with a whoop of delight. "What in the 9 realms?" Thor muttered, changing direction to follow. The strange boy crashed through the roof of a fisherman's cottage near the shore. Thor landed moments later, approaching the new hole cautiously. Inside, he found the boy sitting in a pile of splintered wood and scattered fish, looking completely unharmed and adjusting a straw hat on his head. "That was awesome," the boy shouted, grinning wide enough to split his face. "Hey, where am I? This isn't Fusha Village." He looked around curiously, then spotted Thor. "Whoa. Nice hammer. Are you strong? Wanna fight?" Thor blinked, momentarily speechless. The boy had fallen from the sky, crashed through a roof, and his first reaction was excitement and a challenge. "You're in Asgard, boy. What, are you?" The kid bounced to his feet, dusting himself off. "I'm Monkey D. Luffy. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates." He said this with absolute conviction, as if announcing the most obvious fact in the universe. "What's Asgard? Is it in the Grand Line?" Before Thor could answer, the cottage's owner returned, dropping his fishing nets in shock at the destruction. "My prince. What happened to my, sorry about your roof, old guy?" Luffy called out cheerfully. "It broke my fall though, so thanks." Thor raised a placating hand to the fisherman. "You'll be compensated for the damage." He turned back to the strange boy. "You should come with me. My father will want to meet you." "Your dad? Is he strong too?" Luffy asked, already walking toward the door. His neck stretched unnaturally to look back at the damage he'd caused. "Weird house. Everything here looks weird." "What are you?" Thor asked again, following him outside. Luffy stretched his cheek about a foot away from his face. "I'm a rubber man. I ate the gum fruit. Now I'm all rubber. See?" To demonstrate, he pulled his mouth open to an impossible width, then let it snap back. Thor stared. He'd seen many strange beings across the realms, but nothing quite like this. And you, want to be king of pirates? Yep. I'm gonna find the One Piece and become the Pirate King. Luffy declared, scanning the Golden City in the distance. Whoa. Is that where we're going? Looks fancy. That's Asgard, Thor said, still trying to process the strange boy. Come, we'll take the direct route. He grabbed Luffy by the back of his vest and spun Mjolnir. Hey, what are you, WHOA? They shot into the sky, Luffy dangling from Thor's grip and whooping with delight rather than screaming in terror. The boy actually seemed to be enjoying the wild flight. This is amazing. Luffy shouted over the wind. You gotta teach me how to do this. Thor couldn't help but crack a smile. Whatever this boy was, he certainly wasn't lacking for courage. The throne room fell silent as Thor marched in with the strange boy. Odin sat on his golden throne, Gungnir in hand, his single eye measuring the newcomer. Around him stood his queen Frigga, his counselors, and a scattering of warriors who had been discussing the cosmic disturbance. Loki lingered in the shadows near a column, watching with obvious curiosity. Father, Thor began, I present to you the being that came through the rift. He calls himself, I'm Monkey D. Luffy, the boy interrupted, stepping forward without an ounce of ceremony or reverence. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates. He looked around the massive golden hall with wide eyes. Wow, your house is huge. Are you guys rich or something? Several of the warriors muttered at the disrespect. One of Odin's ravens cawed. Silence, Odin commanded, though there was more curiosity than anger in his tone. He leaned forward. You are not of this realm, boy. The cosmic storm brought you here from somewhere far distant. Do you know how this happened? Luffy picked his nose absently. Nope. I was just fishing on my boat when this weird swirly thing showed up in the sky. Next thing I know, I'm falling. Then Hammer Guy caught me. He pointed at Thor. Thanks for that. Though I would have been fine. I'm rubber. To demonstrate, he pulled his cheek out to an impossible length again. Several warriors gasped. Frigga's eyes widened. Odin's expression remained neutral. And what is this pirate king you claim you will become? Luffy's face lit up. The pirate king is the person with the most freedom in all the seas. The one who finds the One Piece treasure gets the title. That's gonna be me. Freedom, Odin repeated, a strange light entering his eye. Loki chose that moment to step from the shadows. How fascinating. A boy made of rubber who dreams of freedom and kingship. He circled Luffy, studying him. And just how do you plan to become this king, boy? You look rather unimpressive. Luffy turned to Loki with an unbothered grin. I'm gonna get stronger, find a crew, and sail the Grand Line. I made a promise on this hat. He touched the straw hat reverently. I'll give it back to Shanks when I'm a great pirate. Loki smirked. Such confidence from such a small package. I'm gonna punch you if you keep talking down to me, Luffy said cheerfully, still smiling. The room went dead silent. Even Thor tensed. No one threatened a prince of Asgard so casually. Loki's smirk widened. Oh. And how would a rubber boy harm a god? Wanna find out? Luffy cocked back his fist. Enough, Odin commanded, tapping Gungnir once on the floor. The sound resonated through the hall. Luffy of the rubber body, you stand in the halls of Asgard. I am Odin Allfather, ruler of the 9 realms. Luffy blinked. Oh. Cool. Got any food? I'm starving. Several warriors choked on their outrage. Thor found himself hiding a smile. Surprisingly, Odin laughed. It was a brief sound, rough from disuse, but genuine. You are either very brave or very foolish, boy. People tell me the second one a lot, Luffy admitted. Odin stood from his throne, descending the steps with Gungnir in hand. He circled the boy, studying him with his penetrating gaze. There is something about you, a will unlike any I have seen in a mortal. You truly believe you will achieve this dream of yours? Of course. I promised Shanks. Odin nodded slowly, then turned to his queen. Frigga, what do you see in this one? Frigga approached, her movements graceful. She placed a gentle hand on Luffy's shoulder. Chaos and light in equal measure. A heart as vast as the sea. She smiled. And hunger. Perhaps we should feed our guest before further questions. Luffy's eyes lit up. Food? Yes. I'm starving. Odin nodded. Prepare a feast. We will speak more after the boy has eaten. As servants rushed to obey, Thor leaned toward his father. What do you make of him? I am not yet certain, Odin replied quietly. But there is more to this rubber boy than meets the eye. Much more. The Asgardians stared in stunned silence as Luffy devoured plate after plate of food. His arms stretched across the table, grabbing items from all directions, stuffing his mouth until his cheeks bulged impossibly. Entire roasted birds disappeared in seconds. Goblets of mead were drained in single gulps. Is he, even chewing? Fandral whispered to Volstagg, who watched with a mix of horror and admiration. More. Luffy demanded, holding out his empty plate. His stomach had expanded to ridiculous proportions. Thor laughed and slapped the table. By the 9, I've never seen anyone eat like this, not even Volstagg at his hungriest. Volstagg looked mildly offended but couldn't argue with the evidence before him. So, Odin said once Luffy finally slowed down, patting his now enormous belly contentedly, tell us of your world, Luffy. Where do you come from? Between belches, Luffy explained about the East Blue, the Grand Line, devil fruits, and his dream to become Pirate King. He spoke of his hero red-haired Shanks, the Sea Kings, and the execution of Gold Roger. His explanation was chaotic and jumbled, but his enthusiasm was infectious. And your parents? Frigga asked gently. Will they not worry about you? Don't have any, Luffy said casually. Gramps raised me. Well, sorta. He left me with mountain bandits a lot. He's a Marine Vice Admiral. He said this last part with obvious pride despite claiming to be a pirate himself. You were raised by bandits? Loki asked, now genuinely interested. Yep. Deiden and her guys. They're okay. I lived in the forest a lot too, fighting giant animals and stuff to get stronger. Thor exchanged a look with his father. Fighting wild beasts as a child explained much about the boy's fearlessness. And how old are you, Luffy? Frigga asked. 17. I just set out to become Pirate King when that weird storm grabbed me. 17. A mere child by Asgardian standards, and yet there was something in his eyes, a clarity of purpose that many warriors centuries old never achieved. Odin seemed to see it too. He studied Luffy with increasing interest throughout the meal. When the boy finally stopped eating, Odin rose from his seat. Luffy, I sense the hand of fate in your arrival. The storm that brought you here was no accident. Luffy picked his teeth with a chicken bone. Okay. So how do I get back? I need to start gathering my crew. The path between worlds has closed, Odin said. It may be some time before we can find a way to return you to your East Blue. In the meantime. He paused, his single eye evaluating the boy. You will stay here, in Asgard, as my guest. Whispers rippled through the hall. Thor straightened in surprise. Sure. Luffy agreed easily. This place is pretty cool. But I can't stay too long. I made a promise. Indeed. Promises must be kept, Odin nodded solemnly. Thor, show our guest to suitable quarters. He has had a long journey. Thor nodded, though he looked slightly confused by his father's unusual interest in the strange rubber boy. As the feast concluded and people began to disperse, Loki sidled up to his father. "Quite the unusual specimen you've taken in," he murmured. "Any particular reason for your hospitality?" Odin's eye remained fixed on Luffy, who was animatedly describing a sea monster to an increasingly skeptical Fandral. "There is a quality to him," Odin said quietly. "Something I have not seen in a very long time. Watch and you may learn something, Loki." Loki's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded and withdrew, casting another evaluating glance at the rubber boy who had fallen from the sky. Thor led Luffy through the gleaming halls of Asgard's palace. The boy bounced alongside him, asking endless questions, pointing at everything, and occasionally stretching his limbs in ways that made passing servants jump in surprise. "And this is where you'll stay," Thor announced, opening ornate doors to reveal spacious chambers with a massive bed, fine furnishings, and a balcony overlooking the city. "Whoa! This is all for me." Luffy ran inside, immediately jumping on the bed. "It's so bouncy." Thor found himself smiling despite himself. There was something refreshing about the boy's unfiltered enthusiasm. "Yes, it's all yours during your stay. My chambers are just down the hall should you need anything." Luffy stopped bouncing and fixed Thor with a direct look. "Hey, hammer guy, Thor," he corrected. "Thor," Luffy repeated. "You're really strong, right?" "I am the strongest warrior in Asgard," Thor stated without arrogance, simply as fact. "Great. Then fight me." Thor blinked. "What? Fight me?" Luffy hopped off the bed, fists raised in a fighting stance. "I need to get stronger to be Pirate King. Fighting strong people is the best way." Thor chuckled. "You're an odd one, Luffy. But you must be tired after your journey between worlds." "Nope. I'm good." Luffy threw a punch that stretched across the room, just missing Thor's head as he ducked. "By the 9. Thor exclaimed, genuinely surprised by the speed. "You're serious." "Always am about fighting." Luffy grinned, bouncing on his feet. Thor considered the strange boy. He couldn't use his full strength against such a young mortal, but there was a fire in Luffy's eyes that reminded him of himself in younger days. "Very well. A brief spar, then. There's a training yard below." Luffy whooped with excitement and followed Thor down to the training grounds where Asgardian warriors honed their skills. A few were still practicing despite the late hour, and they paused to watch their prince enter with the strange visitor. "Nothing too intense," Thor cautioned as they squared off. "Just a friendly, gum-gum pistol." Luffy's fist shot forward, stretching across the space between them faster than Thor anticipated. Thor barely managed to sidestep, genuine surprise on his face. "Well then." He grinned, twirling Mjolnir. Perhaps not so friendly after all. The remaining warriors gathered around as Thor and Luffy began to spar in earnest. Thor held back his true strength, but found himself increasingly impressed by Luffy's unusual fighting style. The boy's rubber body allowed him to attack from unexpected angles, absorb impacts that would cripple others, and move with unpredictable elasticity. Gum-gum Gatling. Luffy unleashed a barrage of rapid-fire punches, his arms becoming a blur of motion. Thor blocked several with Mjolnir but was caught by others, driven back a step. Impressive speed, he acknowledged, countering with a sweep of his hammer. Luffy stretched his body around the attack, contorting impossibly. "You're super strong," he laughed, clearly enjoying himself. "But I've fought sea monsters bigger than you." The sparring session attracted more attention. Warriors from nearby barracks came to watch. Even Sif and the warriors 3 arrived, drawn by the commotion. "What manner of creature is that?" Volstagg asked as Luffy inflated himself like a balloon to bounce away from Thor's attack. "He came through the cosmic storm," Fandral explained. "Some sort of rubber man from another realm." Hogan watched silently, his normally stoic expression showing hints of interest at Luffy's unusual abilities. Sif observed critically. His technique is chaotic, undisciplined, but effective in its own way. The match escalated as both fighters warmed up. Thor began using more of his strength, testing Luffy's limits. The boy took hits that would have felled warrior giants, his rubber body absorbing the impact. "You're really rubber all the way through, aren't you?" Thor marveled after a particularly solid hit that merely sent Luffy bouncing off a column. "Yep." Luffy stretched his neck to impossible length. "Pretty cool, huh?" Thor laughed. "Indeed. But how's your defense against lightning, Rubber Man?" He raised Mjolnir, calling a small charge of electricity. "Lightning?" Luffy's eyes widened. "Wait, that won't." The minor lightning bolt struck Luffy directly. Instead of absorbing it, the rubber boy conducted the electricity perfectly, hair standing on end as he was shocked. He collapsed in a smoking heap, twitching slightly. Thor lowered Mjolnir in alarm. "Luffy? Are you alright? I thought rubber would insulate you." "And not how it works for me," Luffy stammered, slowly sitting up with his hair frizzed out in all directions. "Lightning really hurts." Unexpectedly, Luffy started laughing. "That was awesome. I didn't know you could do that. What else can you do? Can you teach me?" Thor stared at the singed boy who was laughing off being struck by lightning. "You are either the bravest or the strangest mortal I've ever encountered, Luffy." "Probably both." Luffy hopped back to his feet, apparently recovered. "Let's go again." Before they could resume, a deep voice interrupted. "Enough for tonight, I think." They turned to find Odin standing at the edge of the training yard, observing with an unreadable expression. "Father," Thor acknowledged, lowering Mjolnir. "We were just testing each other's mettle." "Yes, I can see that." Odin approached, studying the still smoking Luffy with interest. "You endured my son's lightning. Impressive for one so young." Luffy shrugged. "It hurt, but I've had worse. This one time, I fought this crocodile guy and, perhaps save your tales for tomorrow," Odin suggested. "The hour grows late, and you have had an eventful day." "I guess I am kinda tired," Luffy admitted, yawning suddenly. The adrenaline of the fight was wearing off, and the reality of his dimensional displacement seemed to finally be hitting him. Odin nodded to Thor. "See him to his chambers." As Thor led the suddenly exhausted Luffy away, Sif approached Odin. "My king, what do you intend to do with the rubber boy? He is strange, but surprisingly capable." Odin watched Luffy's retreating form. "I intend to watch. And perhaps, we shall see." His cryptic answer left Sif confused, but she knew better than to press the All-Father when he spoke in riddles. That night, while Luffy slept soundly in his new chambers, Odin and Frigga held council in their private rooms. "There is something about the boy," Odin mused, gazing out over the sleeping city. "A quality that reminds me of Thor in his youth, and yet, different." "He has an uncomplicated heart," Frigga observed. "Pure in its ambitions. He speaks of being a pirate king, yet I sense no malice in him." "His understanding of piracy seems unique to his world," Odin agreed. "Did you notice how he fought Thor? No fear. No hesitation. Even after being struck by lightning, he wanted to continue." "You're considering something, husband," Frigga said, recognizing the look in his eye. "Something significant." Odin nodded slowly. "The cosmic storm that brought him here was no accident. The Norns have placed him in our path for a purpose." "And what purpose do you believe that is?" "Thor has grown much in recent years, but he still lacks certain perspective. His friendships are with those who have known him all his life." Odin stroked his beard thoughtfully. "This boy, this Luffy, sees the world differently. His presence could be beneficial." Frigga studied her husband carefully. "You're not just thinking of keeping him here temporarily, are you?" "I am considering all possibilities." Odin turned from the window. "Including making him a more permanent part of our family." Adoption? Frigga's eyebrows rose. Like Loki? Perhaps. Let us see how the coming days unfold. Morning in Asgard dawned with golden light streaming through windows of crystal and precious metals. Luffy woke to the unfamiliar luxury of his chambers and spent several confused moments trying to remember where he was. Oh right. The hammer guy in his fancy city. He bounced out of bed and immediately stretched his arms across the room to grab a fruit bowl, stuffing several pieces into his mouth at once. A knock came at his door. Luffy attempted to say, "Come in," through his stuffed cheeks. A servant entered, looking momentarily startled at the sight of Luffy's distended mouth. "The All-Father requests your presence in the Great Hall for breakfast, young sir." Luffy swallowed his massive mouthful in one gulp. More food. Awesome. He followed the servant through the gleaming halls of Asgard's palace, marveling at the architecture, the warriors they passed, the glimpses of the rainbow bridge visible through windows. Everything fascinated him. "This place is way different from Fusha village," he commented to the increasingly bemused servant. In the great hall, Odin sat at the head of a table laden with food. Thor was already there, along with Frigga and a scattering of other Asgardians. Loki's seat was empty. Luffy of the rubber body, Odin greeted him formally. "I trust you slept well." "Yep. Your beds are bouncy." Luffy's attention was already fixed on the feast spread before him. "Can I eat now?" Thor laughed. "Your appetite remains undiminished, I see. Always hungry." Luffy confirmed, reaching for a platter of meat before even sitting down. As Luffy began his now familiar routine of inhaling impossible amounts of food, Odin observed him thoughtfully. Once the boy had eaten enough to slow his pace slightly, Odin spoke again. "Luffy, I have been considering your situation. The pathway that brought you here was a rare cosmic event. It may be some time before we can find a way to return you to your world." Luffy paused mid-bite. "How long is some time?" "It could be days," Odin said carefully. "Or it could be years." "Years?" Luffy dropped his food. "But I need to become Pirate King. I promised Shanks." "I understand the importance of your promise," Odin said, raising a calming hand. "But the barriers between worlds are not easily breached. Heimdall searches even now for signs of connection to your realm." Luffy's usual cheerfulness dimmed. For the first time since arriving, he looked genuinely concerned. "However," Odin continued, "I have a proposition for you." The table fell silent. Even Thor looked curiously at his father. "While you are here, you could merely wait. Or," Odin leaned forward slightly, "you could use this time to grow stronger. To prepare for your eventual return in your quest to become this Pirate King." Luffy's interest visibly rekindled. "Get stronger? How?" "Train with us. Learn from Asgard's warriors. Thor himself could guide you." Odin gestured to his son. "Few better teachers of combat exist in all the realms." Thor looked surprised but pleased. "It would be my honor to help hone your unusual fighting style, Luffy." Luffy considered this, absently stretching his arm to grab another piece of meat. "I guess that makes sense. If I go back super strong, finding the one piece will be easier." His trademark grin returned. "Okay. I'll train with you guys while I'm here." "Excellent," Odin nodded, satisfied. "And there is another matter." He exchanged a glance with Frigga, who nodded encouragingly. "In Asgard, we have a tradition. Warriors who prove their mettle can be adopted into noble houses, becoming brothers in arms in the truest sense." Thor straightened, suddenly understanding where his father was heading. "You fought my son as an equal yesterday," Odin continued. "You showed courage, resilience, and honor, traits we value highly. If you wish it, I would offer you a place in our family during your stay. You would be a prince of Asgard, brother to Thor and Loki." The hall erupted in whispers. Thor's expression was unreadable, a complex mix of surprise and uncertainty. Luffy tilted his head, confused. You want to adopt me? Like Gramps did? In a sense, yes, Odin confirmed. Though I would hope to be more present than this grandfather of yours sounds to have been. Luffy scratched his head. So I'd be a prince? Do princes get extra food? Several warriors coughed to hide their laughter. Trust the boy to focus on the most important issue. Princes eat very well in Asgard, Frigga assured him with a gentle smile. And I'd be brothers with Thor and the skinny guy who talks fancy. Loki, Thor supplied, amusement creeping into his voice. Luffy nodded thoughtfully, then broke into a wide grin. Okay. Sounds fun. But I'm still gonna be Pirate King when I get back home. Of course, Odin agreed gravely. Your destiny remains your own. We merely offer you family while you walk the path toward it. Then it's settled, Frigga said warmly. We shall hold the ceremony tonight. As the meal continued with excited chatter about the upcoming adoption ritual, no one noticed Loki finally entering the hall, freezing in the doorway as he overheard the news. His face flickered through several emotions before settling into a carefully neutral mask as he took his seat. Brother. Thor greeted him. Have you heard? Luffy is to join our family. Another brother? Loki's smile didn't reach his eyes. How unexpected. Luffy waved cheerfully, cheeks still bulging with food. Hey skinny guy. We're gonna be brothers. Indeed, Loki murmured. One big happy family. Word spread quickly through Asgard. By midday, everyone was talking about the strange rubber boy from another realm who had so quickly captured the Allfather's interest that he was to be adopted into the royal family. Thor took Luffy on a tour of the city, partly to show him around and partly to give the palace staff time to prepare for the evening ceremony. This is the training ground where our greatest warriors hone their skills, Thor explained as they walked through an expansive area where Asgardians practiced with various weapons. Cool. Luffy watched a group sparring with swords. But where are the pirates? Thor chuckled. Asgard doesn't have pirates as you know them. We have warriors who sail, but they serve the realm rather than seeking individual glory. That sounds boring, Luffy decided. Being a pirate is all about freedom. Is it? Thor asked, genuinely curious. In the stories we tell, pirates are often villains who plunder and destroy. Some do that, Luffy admitted. But not all pirates are the same. I want to be a pirate to have adventures and find the One Piece. Not to hurt people. Thor nodded thoughtfully. So your dream is not so much about being what we would call a pirate, but about adventure and freedom. Exactly. Luffy beamed, pleased that Thor understood. Being Pirate King means being the freest person in the world. As they continued their tour, they attracted attention everywhere they went. Asgardians pointed and whispered at the strange boy who walked alongside their prince. Luffy, oblivious or indifferent to the attention, peppered Thor with questions about everything they passed. What's that shiny bridge thing in the distance? The Bifrost, Thor explained. It allows us to travel between realms. Can it take me home? Thor's expression sobered. Not unless Heimdall can locate your world. The cosmos is vast, Luffy. Some realms exist in dimensions that rarely intersect with ours. Luffy looked disappointed but quickly bounced back. Then I'll just have to wait until he finds it. And get super strong while I'm here. Thor found himself increasingly impressed by the boy's resilience. Most would be devastated to be torn from their world and stranded in a strange realm, yet Luffy adapted with remarkable ease. Their tour eventually led them to the shipyards where Asgard's magnificent vessels were constructed. Luffy's eyes widened at the sight of the sleek longships. These are your pirate ships. Warships, Thor corrected. Though some are built for exploration of distant seas. Luffy ran forward, examining the nearest vessel with obvious excitement. It's cool, but where are the cannons? The figurehead? The pirate flag? Our ships are designed differently, Thor explained, amused. They're built for speed and maneuverability. When I get my pirate ship, it's gonna have a great figurehead. Luffy declared, stretching his arms up to pull himself onto the deck of the nearest ship. Maybe a lion. Or a dragon. Something awesome. Thor watched as Luffy bounded around the ship, examining everything with childlike curiosity. An idea began to form in his mind. Later, as they made their way back to the palace, Thor asked, Luffy, tell me more about these pirate ships from your world. Luffy launched into an enthusiastic description of his ideal vessel, complete with energetic gestures and sound effects. Thor listened thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions about specific features or functions. You really love the sea, don't you? Thor observed when Luffy finally paused for breath. The sea is where adventure is. Luffy confirmed. That's why I've gotta be Pirate King. Thor nodded, decision made. Come, little brother-to-be. We should prepare for tonight's ceremony. The Great Hall of Asgard had been transformed for the adoption ceremony. Torches blazed in ornate holders, casting dancing light over the assembled crowd. Warriors and nobles filled the space, all curious to witness this unprecedented event, the adoption of a strange boy from another realm into the house of Odin. Thor stood to the right of his father's throne, dressed in formal armor with his red cape flowing behind him. Loki stood to the left, his green and gold attire immaculate, his expression carefully neutral. Nervous? Thor asked as they waited. About our new rubber brother? Loki's voice held a hint of sarcasm. Why would I be nervous? Father's sudden adoption of strange beings has worked out so well in the past. Thor frowned. Father sees something in him, Loki. Father always sees something in his strays, Loki murmured, but fell silent as trumpets announced Odin's arrival. The All-Father entered in full regalia, Gungnir in hand, his golden eye patch gleaming in the torchlight. Frigga walked beside him, resplendent in flowing robes. The crowd bowed as they passed. Once Odin had taken his throne, the massive doors at the far end of the hall opened to reveal Luffy. Someone had managed to convince him to wear formal Asgardian attire, a simplified version of Thor's ceremonial armor, sized for his smaller frame. Yet he had flatly refused to remove his straw hat, which sat incongruously atop his head. A murmur ran through the crowd as Luffy walked forward. He didn't process regally as tradition dictated, instead, he bounced along, waving at people he recognized from his brief time in Asgard. Hey! Food guy! He called to Volstagg. Sword lady! To Sif, who looked torn between amusement and offense. By the time he reached the foot of Odin's throne, several of the stuffier nobles looked scandalized, while others struggled to hide smiles. Monkey D. Luffy, Odin's voice filled the hall, you stand before the throne of Asgard as one who would join our house. Do you come with honest heart and noble purpose? Luffy adjusted his hat. Yep. Odin's mouth twitched slightly. Do you swear to uphold the honor of Asgard, to stand with your new brothers in times of peace and war, and to bear the name of Odinson with dignity? Sure. As long as I can still be Pirate King someday. A few gasps from the crowd. One did not normally add conditions to sacred oaths. To everyone's surprise, Odin chuckled. Your path remains your own, Luffy. We merely offer kinship on your journey. He descended from his throne, standing before Luffy. Kneel, Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy looked confused. Do I have to? Thor coughed. Loki closed his eyes in exasperation. It is traditional, Odin explained patiently. Oh, okay. Luffy dropped to one knee, still looking slightly puzzled. Odin placed Gungnir's tip gently on Luffy's shoulder. I, Odin All-Father, hereby name you Luffy Odinson, Prince of Asgard, brother to Thor and Loki, heir to the legacy of our house. Golden light flowed from Gungnir, washing over Luffy briefly before fading. The boy shivered slightly, eyes widening. Whoa! That felt weird. Like eating a devil fruit but less gross. Odin raised an eyebrow but continued. Rise, my son, and be welcomed into your new family. Luffy bounced to his feet. Instead of the formal bow expected at this point, he threw his arms around Odin in a hug, stretching them around the Allfather multiple times. The crowd gasped collectively. After a moment of shocked stillness, Odin awkwardly patted Luffy's head. Yes, well. Welcome, indeed. Thor burst into laughter, striding forward to clap Luffy on the shoulder as the boy unwound himself from Odin. Welcome, brother. Even Loki stepped forward, though his smile remained coolly polite. Welcome to the family, little brother. I'm sure your unique qualities will make things interesting. Frigga approached last, bending to embrace Luffy normally. Welcome, my son. May you find happiness in your time with us. Thanks. Luffy grinned at all of them. This is pretty cool. So what's for dinner? I'm starving. The formal ceremony transitioned into a feast that would be talked about for years to come, not least because the newest prince of Asgard managed to eat what would normally feed a small army. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Luffy settled into life in Asgard with remarkable ease, though not without causing frequent chaos. His training with Thor began in earnest, and the two developed a genuine brotherly bond despite their differences. On a crisp morning 4 months after Luffy's arrival, Thor found him sitting atop one of the palace's highest towers, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the distant sea. Contemplating jumping? Thor asked as he sat beside him. I wouldn't recommend it, though I suppose you might bounce. Luffy grinned. I did that yesterday when no one was looking. Bounced all the way back up here. Thor laughed, then noticed the slightly wistful look in Luffy's eyes as he returned to gazing at the horizon. You're thinking of your home. Yeah, Luffy admitted. Wondering if Heimdall's found it yet. He continues to search, Thor assured him. But the cosmos is vast beyond imagining. I know. Luffy adjusted his straw hat. I don't mind being here. You guys are awesome, and I'm getting super strong. But I made a promise to Shanks. I can't become Pirate King in Asgard. Thor nodded thoughtfully. Then, making a decision, he stood. Come with me, brother. There's something I wish to show you. Curious, Luffy followed Thor through the palace and down to the shipyards. Thor led him past the main construction areas to a secluded dock where a single vessel sat covered by an enormous tarp. What's that? Luffy asked. Something I commissioned the day after your adoption. Thor gestured to the shipwrights waiting nearby. Unveil it. The workers pulled away the covering to reveal a ship unlike any other in Asgard. It was larger than the standard longships, with a reinforced hull covered in gleaming metal. But what made Luffy's eyes widen was the figurehead, a massive carving of a roaring lion with a flowing mane. Is that, Luffy began, voice unusually quiet. Your pirate ship, Thor confirmed. Or at least, the beginnings of one. Built to the specifications you described, but enhanced with Asgardian materials and design. It's amazing. Luffy stretched his arms to catapult himself onto the deck, bouncing excitedly from bow to stern, examining every detail. It has cannons. And look at that lion. And the mast is huge. Thor joined him on the deck, watching his adopted brother's joy with satisfaction. It's not complete yet. The shipwrights need guidance on some of the features unique to your world's vessels. And it still needs a name. Luffy ran his hand along the ship's railing reverently. In my world, the Pirate King Gold Roger's ship was called the Oro Jackson. My friend Shanks sails the Red Force. He looked thoughtfully at the gleaming vessel beneath his feet. This one should have an awesome name too. Indeed it should, a deep voice agreed. They turned to see Odin approaching along the dock, Gungnir in hand. Father. Thor greeted him. I was just showing Luffy his ship. So I see. Odin boarded the vessel, examining it with an appraising eye. Fine craftsmanship. It's the best ship ever. Luffy declared. Thor had it built for me. With your permission, of course, Thor added quickly. Odin nodded. A worthy gift for a brother. But perhaps it could be more than merely a fine ship. He tapped Gungnir against the deck. The seas of Asgard are rich with magic and mystery. A vessel for a prince, especially one who would be pirate king, should be exceptional. Luffy's eyes widened. You're gonna make it magic. I could enhance it, Odin confirmed. Imbue it with properties beyond ordinary vessels. If that would please you. Yes. Luffy jumped excitedly, accidentally stretching his legs so high he nearly toppled overboard. Make it super special. The best pirate ship ever. Odin's eye crinkled with amusement. Very well. But a ship touched by the power of Asgard must have a name worthy of its nature. Luffy thought hard, an unusual expression of concentration on his normally carefree face. It needs to be something awesome. Something that shows it's not just any pirate ship. His face suddenly lit up. I know. Naglfar. Thor and Odin exchanged surprised glances. Naglfar? Thor repeated. Where did you hear that name? Loki told me stories about it. He said it's a legendary ship made from the fingernails of dead people, which is kind of gross, but super cool too. He said it's supposed to carry warriors to the final battle someday. Luffy looked immensely pleased with himself for remembering. This ship isn't made of fingernails, but it's still gonna be legendary. Thor looked uncertain. Luffy, in our legends, Naglfar is a vessel of both doom and salvation, Odin interrupted thoughtfully. A ship of destiny. He studied Luffy with his penetrating gaze. An interesting choice, my son. So can we name it that? Luffy asked eagerly. After a moment's consideration, Odin nodded. Names have power. Perhaps there is meaning in your choice beyond what you know. He raised Gungnir. Naglfar it shall be. The spear glowed golden as Odin touched it to the ship's hull. Light spread throughout the vessel, seeping into every plank and fitting before fading slowly. What did that do? Luffy asked, bouncing on his toes. In time, you will discover its gifts, Odin said cryptically. For now, know that Naglfar is bound to you as its captain. It will respond to your will and need in ways no ordinary ship could. Awesome. Luffy ran to the figurehead, climbing onto the lion's head and sitting there with his legs dangling. I can't wait to sail it. Thor joined him at the bow. We'll complete its construction, then take it for its maiden voyage. I'll teach you to navigate Asgard's seas. And then I can be a pirate here too. Luffy declared happily. At least until I can go home and become Pirate King for real. From the dock, Odin watched his two sons talking animatedly on the figurehead of the newly christened Naglfar. Despite the differences in their appearance and origin, there was a genuine brotherhood developing between them. Unseen by the others, Loki observed from the shadows of a nearby structure, his expression unreadable as he watched this latest development in the saga of Asgard's adopted rubber prince. The seasons changed in Asgard. A year passed since Luffy's unexpected arrival through the cosmic storm. The rubber boy, now officially Luffy Odinson, had become a familiar and generally beloved figure throughout the realm, though some of the more traditional nobles still clucked their tongues at his unconventional behavior. His training with Thor had yielded impressive results. Luffy's natural fighting instincts, combined with Asgardian combat techniques, had transformed his already formidable rubber abilities into something truly extraordinary. He still couldn't match Thor's raw power, but his unpredictability and increasingly refined control of his elasticity made him a challenging opponent for even seasoned warriors. The Naglfar had been completed and now sat proudly at its own special dock. True to Odin's word, the ship displayed unusual properties. It responded to Luffy's commands with uncanny precision, sometimes seeming to anticipate his wishes before he voiced them. Its hull proved nearly indestructible, and it moved through water with impossible speed. Luffy had taken to wearing a mixture of his original clothing style and Asgardian garments, keeping his beloved straw hat while incorporating elements that marked him as a prince of the realm. He had made friends throughout Asgard, though his closest companions remained Thor and, surprisingly, Loki, whose initial coolness had gradually given way to a guarded fondness for the irrepressible rubber boy. On the anniversary of Luffy's arrival, Odin called his family to the throne room for a private audience. "My sons," he greeted them as Thor, Loki, and Luffy assembled before him. Frigga stood at his side, her expression suggesting she already knew the purpose of this gathering. "I have news concerning Luffy's home realm." Luffy immediately perked up, bouncing forward. "You found it? I can go home." "Not exactly," Odin tempered his excitement. "Heimdall has detected echoes. Vibrations in the cosmic fabric that suggest your realm exists in a dimensional fold not far from our own." "What does that mean?" Thor asked. "It means that while we cannot yet open a direct path, we have confirmed its location. With time and study, we may eventually find a way to create a bridge." "How long?" Luffy asked, unusually serious. "That remains uncertain," Odin admitted. "It could be years yet. But there is hope where before there was only conjecture." Luffy absorbed this, emotions playing across his expressive face. Relief that his world still existed and might someday be reachable. Disappointment that the time remained undefined. Finally, determination settled in his eyes. "Okay. Then I'll keep getting stronger here until it's time." Odin nodded approvingly. "Your spirit remains undiminished, my son. It is one of your greatest strengths." "Indeed," agreed a new voice from the doorway. They turned to see a broad-shouldered, bearded figure enter. "The boy has heart, All-Father. I'll grant him that." "Njord," Odin acknowledged with a respectful nod. "You honor us with your presence." Thor straightened, surprised by the sea god's unexpected appearance. Loki's eyes narrowed with interest. "Who's the old guy?" Luffy asked bluntly. "Show respect, brother," Thor murmured. "This is Njord, god of the seas and winds." "Oh. A sea god?" Luffy's eyes widened. "That's so cool. Do you know any sea monsters? Have you found the All Blue? Can you control storms?" Njord's bushy eyebrows rose at the barrage of questions. "Enthusiastic, isn't he?" he remarked to Odin. "You have no idea," Loki muttered. "I've come about the ship," Njord stated, turning his attention fully to Luffy. "This Naglfar you've named and claimed." "Yeah. It's awesome." Luffy grinned. "Want to see it?" "I've seen it," Njord said dryly. "Hard to miss when it races across my waters at impossible speeds with a rubber boy hanging from its figurehead shouting about being a pirate king." Luffy laughed. "That's how you're supposed to ride a ship. Is it now?" Njord stroked his beard, studying Luffy with increasing interest. "And what does a boy from another realm know about sailing my seas?" "I know tons about sailing," Luffy declared. "Well, not the boring navigation stuff. But I know about adventure. And freedom. That's what the sea is all about." Something sparked in Njord's eyes, challenge, amusement, or perhaps both. "Is that what you think? That the sea exists for your adventure and freedom?" "Yep." Luffy replied without hesitation. "The sea is the most free place there is. That's why pirates love it." Njord turned to Odin. "This boy claims to understand the sea, All-Father. He names a ship after the vessel of doom. He calls himself a pirate king." His tone was measured but held an undercurrent of something. Not quite anger, but certainly intensity. "And you've made him your son?" "I have," Odin confirmed calmly. Njord returned his gaze to Luffy. Then perhaps the boy should prove his worthiness of such honors. A challenge? Thor asked, stepping forward protectively. Luffy is young yet, Lord Njord, and new to our ways. I've watched him this past year, Njord replied. Young he may be, but helpless he is not. He addressed Luffy directly. You claim to understand the sea, boy. You name yourself a future king of it. In your world, perhaps such titles come cheap. In Asgard, they must be earned. Luffy tilted his head. So you want to fight me? Not exactly, Njord's weathered face split in a smile that held equal parts amusement and menace. I wish to test you. 3 trials upon the waters of Asgard. If you pass, I shall acknowledge your right to sail my domain and even grant Naglfar additional blessings. If you fail. His smile widened. I claim your ship and you renounce all claims to mastery of any sea. Njord, Frigga spoke for the first time, her tone cautioning. It's okay. Luffy bounced forward eagerly. I accept. I'll pass your tests, old sea guy. Luffy, Thor began warningly, but Odin raised a hand. My son has accepted the challenge, the Allfather stated. And it is his right to do so. Njord nodded, satisfied. 3 days hence, bring your Naglfar to the western fjord. The first trial awaits there. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and boy. Bring a crew. No captain sails alone. After Njord departed, Thor rounded on Luffy. Do you realize what you've done? Njord is not known for easy tests. His challenges have claimed the lives of experienced Asgardian sailors. Luffy just grinned. Sounds exciting. Don't worry, I'll pass his tests no problem. He looked around at his adoptive family. So, who wants to be on my pirate crew? Word of Njord's challenge spread quickly through Asgard. By nightfall, everyone was talking about the sea god's unprecedented interest in the adopted prince and the trials that awaited him. Luffy, characteristically unfazed, spent the evening in the Great Hall attempting to recruit crew members for his ship. Come on, it'll be fun, he urged Volstagg, who looked torn between amusement and horror at the prospect. Young prince, while I admire your spirit, I am a warrior of land, not sea, Volstagg protested. The last time I was on a ship, I spent the entire journey feeding the fishes, if you take my meaning. Gross, Luffy wrinkled his nose. Okay, what about you, Fandral? You look like a pirate with that fancy sword. Fandral preened momentarily before Hogan elbowed him. I would make a magnificent pirate, it's true, but alas, I've sworn to accompany Lady Sif on a mission to Vanaheim 3 days hence. Convenient timing, Loki remarked dryly from nearby. Luffy turned his attention to Thor. You'll be on my crew, right, brother? Thor hesitated. Luffy, these trials are yours to face. It would not be proper for me to, oh come on. Pirates don't care about proper. We care about adventure and having an awesome crew. Luffy wheedled. Please. I need a strong right-hand man. Thor's resolve visibly weakened. Well, when you put it that way. I'll join your crew. Everyone turned in surprise to see Sif standing with arms crossed, a challenging gleam in her eye. You will? Luffy asked, brightening. Someone needs to ensure you don't make a complete fool of yourself, she stated, though there was the barest hint of a smile on her lips. I've sailed Asgard's waters since I was a child. You'll need my knowledge. Great. That's 2. Luffy counted on his fingers. I need more though. A real pirate crew should be bigger. 3, Loki corrected, stepping forward with a sigh of resignation. I suppose I should witness this disaster firsthand. Thor looked at his brother in surprise. You're volunteering, Loki. Someone needs to bring a bit of intelligence to this venture, Loki sniffed. Between your brawn and Luffy's Luffiness, you'll need a strategist. Awesome. Luffy threw his arms around both his brothers, stretching to encompass their shoulders. This is gonna be the best pirate crew ever. As the evening progressed, 2 more volunteers joined Luffy's impromptu crew, Brunhilde, a Valkyrie curious about the Rubber Prince's unusual abilities, and Korg, a Kronan warrior who had become one of Luffy's sparring partners. 5 crew members plus me as captain. Luffy declared happily. That's perfect for Naglfar's first real mission. Later, as the celebrations wound down, Thor found Luffy on a balcony overlooking the city. You seem pleased with yourself, he observed. Why wouldn't I be? Luffy grinned. I've got an awesome ship, a great crew, and a cool challenge ahead. This is exactly what being a pirate is all about. Thor leaned against the railing beside him. You truly aren't worried about Njord's trials? Nope. Whatever they are, we'll handle them together. Luffy adjusted his straw hat confidently. That's what crews do. Thor studied his adopted brother thoughtfully. You know, when father first brought you into our family, I wasn't sure what to think. Another brother, so different from us, with strange powers and stranger dreams. Yeah. Luffy glanced at him curiously. But now I understand why he did it, Thor continued. You bring something to Asgard that we needed, though we didn't know it. A perspective unclouded by thousands of years of tradition. A simple joy in adventure for its own sake. Luffy picked his nose thoughtfully. I just do what I want. That's all. Thor laughed. And therein lies your wisdom, little brother. He clapped Luffy on the shoulder. Now, we should rest. The next few days will be challenging. Hey, Thor. Luffy asked as they turned to go inside. Do you think Heimdall will really find a way for me to go home someday? Thor's expression softened. If it can be done, it will be. But until then, know that you have a home here too. Luffy nodded, unusually pensive. Yeah. It's nice having 2 homes. And 2 families. He brightened. And now I'll have 2 places where I'm a legendary pirate. Thor chuckled. One step at a time, brother. First, we have a sea god to impress. Chapter 2, Naglfar Rising. 3 years passed since Luffy crashed through the cosmic rift into Asgard. 3 years of training, adapting, and growing alongside his adoptive family. The scrawny 17-year-old with wild rubber powers had transformed into a formidable 20-year-old warrior prince who combined the unbridled creativity of his devil fruit with Asgardian combat techniques. Luffy stood at the bow of Naglfar, his prized ship now fully completed after years of refinement. The morning sun glinted off its reinforced hull, a fusion of Asgardian metals and enchanted wood that could withstand the harshest cosmic waters. The lion figurehead roared silently at the horizon, its golden mane flowing in the breeze. Still obsessed with your toy boat, brother? Luffy turned to see Thor approaching along the dock, Mjolnir swinging casually at his side. He grinned and stretched his arm across the distance, grabbing the edge of Thor's cape and yanking himself over to land beside him. Naglfar isn't a toy. She's the greatest ship in all the realms. Luffy proclaimed, slapping Thor's shoulder hard enough to stagger most men. And she's finally ready for real adventures. Thor laughed, examining the vessel with genuine admiration. She is magnificent. Father's enchantments and your unconventional modifications have created something unique. Wait till you see what she can do now. Luffy bounced excitedly. The dwarves of Nidavellir added these cannons that can fire different types of ammunition. And check this out, he stretched his arm to grab a lever on deck, pulling it to reveal hidden compartments along the hull. Impressive, Thor nodded. Though I'm still not convinced those harpoon launchers were necessary. Of course they're necessary. What if we encounter a sea monster? Or an enemy ship? Pirates need weapons. As you've reminded us daily for 3 years, Thor said dryly. He studied Luffy's appearance. The straw hat remained his constant companion, but now he wore it with a mix of pirate and Asgardian clothing. His red vest was reinforced with light Asgardian armor at the shoulders, and he'd added a captain's coat with the symbol of Asgard subtly woven into its design alongside his personal mark, a skull wearing a straw hat. 3 years, Thor mused. You've changed much since you fell from the sky, little brother. Luffy stretched his neck to look at himself upside down. Have I? I don't feel that different. Just stronger. To demonstrate, he casually punched the air, his fist creating a small shock wave, a technique he'd developed by combining his rubber properties with Asgardian strength training. More than just stronger, Thor corrected. You've become sharper. Your control over your abilities has progressed remarkably. Luffy grinned. Had to keep up with you and your fancy hammer. He hopped back onto his ship with a single bound. Come on. Let's take her out for a final test run before the maiden voyage tomorrow. Thor hesitated. Actually, that's why I came to find you. Father has called a council meeting. Something about disturbing reports from Heimdall. Luffy's excitement dimmed slightly. Ah, man. Another boring meeting. Can't you just tell me the important stuff later? I would, but Father specifically requested your presence. He mentioned it might relate to the pathways between realms. That got Luffy's attention immediately. Despite finding a home in Asgard, he never forgot his dream of returning to his world and becoming king of the pirates. Any news about interrealm travel instantly piqued his interest. Fine, let's go. But we're definitely taking Naglfar out later. The council chamber buzzed with tense conversation when Thor and Luffy arrived. Odin sat at the head of the table, his expression grave. Frigga stood at his side, while Loki lounged in a chair nearby, feigning disinterest though his eyes missed nothing. Various generals and advisors filled the remaining seats. Ah, my sons join us at last, Odin acknowledged them as they entered. Sorry we're late. Luffy called cheerfully, dropping into a chair and immediately putting his sandaled feet up on the table. I was showing Thor the new cannons on Naglfar. Several counselors frowned at the breach of protocol, but after 3 years, most had grown accustomed to Luffy's casual disregard for formality. Odin merely raised an eyebrow, and Luffy reluctantly lowered his feet. Heimdall has brought concerning news, Odin began once Thor had taken his seat. Speak, Guardian, and tell my sons what you have told me. Heimdall stepped forward, his golden eyes reflecting the light strangely. I have observed anomalies in the fabric between realms. Similar to the rift that brought Prince Luffy to us, but smaller and more numerous. Luffy perked up. Does that mean there's a way back to my world? Not directly, Heimdall replied. These anomalies are unstable. They appear briefly before collapsing. But their frequency has increased in recent months. What causes these rifts? Thor asked. Unknown, Heimdall's deep voice resonated through the chamber. But I have sensed presences, observing them from the other side. In particular, there is one entity that seems to take special interest whenever a rift appears near Asgard. What kind of entity? Loki inquired, finally showing genuine interest. Ancient. Calculating. A collector of rarities. Heimdall's gaze shifted to Luffy. And it seems most attentive when you are nearby, Prince Luffy. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Luffy. Me? Why would anyone be watching me? Luffy asked, picking his nose absently. Perhaps because you yourself are a rarity, Odin suggested. A being from a distant realm with powers unknown in the 9 realms. Such uniqueness attracts collectors. Like the one who held the reality stone for a time, Thor murmured. Indeed, Odin nodded. Tanalir Tyvan. The collector. He seeks specimens for his collection, beings, objects, anything unique or the last of its kind. He wants to collect me. Luffy's face scrunched in confusion. Like a bug in a jar. That's stupid. I'm a person. The collector makes little distinction between people and objects when it comes to his collection, Loki explained with a smirk. To him, you're simply another fascinating specimen, the only rubber man in the 9 realms. Well, he can't have me, Luffy declared, standing up so quickly his chair toppled backward. I've got stuff to do. I'm gonna be Pirate King. No one's giving you to the collector, Thor assured him, shooting Loki an irritated glance. Nevertheless, Odin continued, this bears watching. If the collector has indeed taken interest in you, Luffy, he may attempt to acquire you. And he has resources beyond imagining. Let him try. Luffy punched his palm with a rubbery thwack. I've gotten way stronger. There's more, Heimdall interrupted. The rifts themselves pose a potential danger. They appear to be weakening the barriers between specific realms, particularly between Asgard and the dimensional fold where Prince Luffy's world exists. That got everyone's attention. Luffy's eyes widened. You mean my world and Asgard are getting closer? He asked. In a manner of speaking, Heimdall confirmed. Though not physically. The dimensional barriers thin between them. This could eventually allow travel between the realms, but not in a controlled manner. It could also allow threats from either side to cross over, Odin added grimly. If entities from the darkest corners of the 9 realms found passage to your unprotected world, Luffy. He didn't need to finish the thought. For all his carefree nature, Luffy understood the implications immediately. His expression hardened. We can't let that happen. My friends back home wouldn't stand a chance against some of the stuff I've seen here. Precisely why we must investigate these rifts, Odin concluded. But that brings us to more immediate concerns. Tomorrow marks the official maiden voyage of Naglfar and the first of Njord's challenges. Yeah. Finally. Luffy's serious mood evaporated instantly at the mention of his ship. The timing is not coincidental, Odin continued. Njord is no fool. He senses the changes in the cosmic currents. His challenges will test not just your worthiness to sail Asgard's waters, but perhaps your readiness to face whatever comes through these rifts. Luffy shrugged. Doesn't matter what his reasons are. I'm gonna pass his tests and prove I deserve to be Pirate King. Several counselors exchanged glances at his simplistic view, but Thor smiled. Luffy's straightforward determination remained his greatest strength. Your crew is prepared? Odin asked. You bet. Sif's been teaching everyone sailing stuff, and Loki figured out all those navigation charts. Luffy pointed at his adoptive brother. Though he complains a lot. Because your idea of navigation is, go where the adventure is, Loki retorted. Which is not actually a direction. It's worked for me so far. You literally fell through a tear in reality and landed in another world. I would not call that successful navigation. I ended up somewhere awesome, didn't I? Luffy countered with unassailable logic. Thor laughed, and even Odin's stern expression softened. Very well. Focus on Njord's challenge tomorrow. But remain vigilant. These rifts and the collector's interest cannot be ignored. I've got it covered. Luffy declared confidently, retrieving his fallen chair and sitting back down. So are we done with the boring meeting now? I want to check on the last supply deliveries for Naglfar. Odin sighed but nodded his dismissal. Some battles weren't worth fighting, and containing Luffy's enthusiasm was one of them. Later that afternoon, Luffy supervised the loading of supplies onto Naglfar with the manic energy that characterized everything he did. His unique form of leadership involved stretching his arms to multiple places at once, occasionally becoming tangled in his own limbs, and shouting enthusiastic but often contradictory instructions. Put the meat barrels over there. No, wait, they should be closer to the galley. Actually, bring one to my quarters too. You never know when you'll need emergency meat. Sif watched from the quarterdeck, arms crossed and expression wavering between amusement and exasperation. After 3 years as Luffy's reluctant sailing master, she had developed a grudging fondness for the Rubber Prince's chaotic methods. "Your organization skills remain uniquely terrible," she commented as Luffy catapulted himself up to join her. "How you expect to captain a vessel when you can't even organize a simple supply loading is beyond me. That's why I've got you." Luffy grinned, completely unbothered by the criticism. "You do the boring stuff, I handle the adventure parts." "How convenient for you," she replied dryly, but there was no real heat in her words. "The navigation charts are complete. Loki's spellwork should allow us to track our position even in the magical storms of the Western Fjord." "Great. Though I still say we could just follow our guts." "Your gut navigation got us stranded in the mists of Nibelheim for 3 days last summer," she reminded him. "Yeah, but we fought that awesome frost serpent. That was fun." "Nearly dying of hypothermia was not fun, Luffy." He just laughed, the memory of danger already transmuted into another exciting adventure in his mind. Sif shook her head, but a small smile tugged at her lips. Luffy's ability to find joy in almost any situation had proven strangely infectious over the years. "The others will arrive at dawn," she informed him, returning to business. "Korg is bringing additional weaponry from the forges, and Brunhilde has something from the Valkyrie armory she thinks you'll find useful." "And Thor and Loki? Your brothers will be here." Though Loki mentioned something about preparing contingencies that he refused to elaborate on. Classic Loki, Luffy nodded sagely. He always has some sneaky backup plan. Sif studied him for a moment. Despite his carefree demeanor, Luffy had matured subtly during his years in Asgard. His rubbery face had lost some of its childish roundness, replaced by sharper angles. His eyes, always bright with determination, now carried occasional flashes of the wisdom he'd absorbed from Odin and the strategic thinking he'd learned from Loki. Yet at his core, he remained the same Luffy who had fallen from the sky, driven by simple dreams and an unbreakable will. "You're really not concerned about tomorrow, are you?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Luffy tilted his head. "Why would I be? We've got a great ship, an awesome crew, and I'm way stronger than when I got here. Whatever old Seabeard throws at us, we'll handle it." "Njord is not to be underestimated," she cautioned. "He is ancient and powerful, with dominion over all Asgard's waters. His challenges have broken experienced captains." "Good thing I'm not experienced then," Luffy declared with his signature logic. "Can't break what doesn't follow the rules." Sif stared at him for a moment before a laugh escaped her, a sound rare enough that several nearby workers glanced over in surprise. "What?" Luffy asked, genuinely confused by her reaction. "Nothing," she shook her head, still smiling. "You just continue to be the strangest person I've ever met, Luffy Odinson." "Thanks. I think." She stepped closer, her expression turning more serious. "Just promise me one thing. If the situation becomes truly dangerous tomorrow, you'll listen if I tell you to retreat. Pride isn't worth dying for." "I don't make promises I can't keep," Luffy replied, his own expression surprisingly firm. "But I promise I won't let anything happen to the crew. That's a captain's job." Their eyes locked for a long moment before Sif nodded, accepting his answer for what it was, honest, if not what she'd hoped for. "Very well, Captain," she said, adding just enough emphasis to the title to sound slightly mocking. "I'll complete the final preparations. Try not to cause too much chaos until tomorrow." As she turned to leave, Luffy called after her, "Hey, Sif." She glanced back. "Thanks for being on my crew all this time. You're awesome." The simple, direct compliment caught her off guard. Sif felt an unexpected warmth rise to her cheeks and nodded curtly before striding away, irritated at her own reaction. After centuries of warfare and adventure alongside Thor, why did a rubber-brained pirate wannabe's childish praise affect her? Perhaps because nothing Luffy ever said was calculated or false. His honesty was as absolute as his determination, a rare quality in a realm where gods played millennium-long games of strategy and deception. Night fell over Asgard, the stars blazing across the sky in constellations unfamiliar to Luffy when he'd first arrived, but now as known to him as old friends. He sat alone atop Naglfar's mainmast, legs dangling as he gazed upward, wondering which of those distant points of light might be closest to his original world. Preparing for tomorrow's humiliation, a smooth voice called from below. Luffy looked down to see Loki standing on the deck, a slim leather case tucked under one arm. The trickster god hadn't changed much in the years since Luffy's arrival, still preferring shadows and schemes to Thor's direct approach. Nope. Preparing for victory. Luffy stretched his arm down, grabbing the mast and slinging himself to land beside Loki with practiced ease. Ah, of course. How silly of me to question the future pirate king, Loki replied with his usual mix of sarcasm and genuine amusement. Of all the Asgardians, he found Luffy's antics the most entertaining, when they weren't directed at him. What's that? Luffy pointed at the case. Insurance, Loki answered, opening it to reveal a set of ornate navigation instruments unlike any Luffy had seen before. Enchanted sextants and compasses that can navigate not just physical waters, but magical currents as well. If Njord attempts to mislead us with illusions or shifting waterways, which he almost certainly will, these should help penetrate the deception. Cool. Luffy poked at the instruments curiously. But I thought you already did all that navigation magic stuff. I did, but these are specialized. Created for scenarios where reality itself becomes fluid. Loki closed the case. Call it a backup plan. You always have backup plans. One of us should, Loki replied pointedly. Your strategy of punch things until they stop moving has its limitations. Has worked so far. Luffy grinned unrepentantly. Loki sighed but couldn't entirely hide his smile. Yes, well, let's hope it continues to serve. Njord is not like the training dummies or even the creatures we've encountered on our previous excursions. He is primordial, Luffy. The sea itself given form and will. So he's like a really strong water guy. I fought one of those before. He's not. Loki stopped, realizing the futility of explaining cosmic entities to someone whose worldview was as straightforward as Luffy's. Yes, a really strong water guy. That's exactly what the ancient god of seas and storms is. Great. Then I already know how to fight him if I need to. Loki shook his head in resignation. Just try to remember that these trials are supposed to be tests of worthiness, not just combat. Njord will be evaluating your understanding of the sea, your skills as a captain, your judgment. Yeah, I know, Luffy waved dismissively. Thor already gave me the big responsibility speech. Twice. And it clearly made a deep impression, Loki observed dryly. Luffy suddenly turned serious, a transformation that still caught Loki off guard even after years of witnessing it. The change was subtle, his posture remained casual, his straw hat still shadowed his eyes, but something in his gaze sharpened, like a blade being unsheathed. I get it, Loki. I know Njord's tests are a big deal. I know there's all this stuff about being worthy of Asgard and respecting the sea. He looked out toward the distant waters. But that's not why I'm doing this. Oh. Do enlighten me on your profound motivations, Loki prompted, genuinely curious. The sea is freedom, Luffy said simply. In my world or this one, that doesn't change. I respect the sea not because it's controlled by some god, but because it can't really be controlled by anyone. That's what makes it awesome. He turned back to Loki, his usual grin returning. I'm gonna pass Njord's tests because I understand that better than he thinks I do. Loki stared at him, momentarily speechless. These rare glimpses of depth behind Luffy's seemingly simple nature always caught him by surprise. Well, he finally said, perhaps you'll surprise the old sea god after all. He handed over the case of instruments. These go in the navigation room. Try not to break them before they're needed. No promises. Luffy took the case, then suddenly slung his free arm around Loki's shoulders, pulling him into a rubbery half-hug. "Thanks for looking out for the crew, brother." Loki stiffened at the contact but didn't pull away. After a moment, he awkwardly patted Luffy's arm. "Yes, well. Someone has to ensure we all survive your captaincy." Luffy just laughed and released him, bouncing away to store the navigation instruments. Loki watched him go, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face before he turned and vanished into the shadows. Dawn arrived with perfect sailing weather, clear skies, a steady wind, and calm waters. Almost too perfect, in Thor's estimation, as he strode up the gangplank to Naglfar where the crew had assembled. Enjoyed setting the stage, he commented to Sif, who stood ready in light armor, her shield and sword secured at her back. "Indeed. The calm before the storm, quite literally." She nodded toward the horizon where a faint line of darkness was barely visible. "That's no natural formation." Thor followed her gaze and frowned. "The challenge begins before we even set sail, it seems." "Thor." Luffy's voice boomed across the deck moments before the rubber man himself launched from the quarterdeck, stretching his arms to grab his brother and pull himself into a collision that would have knocked most beings off their feet. Thor merely braced himself, used to Luffy's enthusiastic greetings after 3 years. "Ready for adventure?" Luffy asked, practically vibrating with excitement. He wore his captain's coat over his modified Asgardian armor, the straw hat firmly in place, a recent scar under his left eye somehow making him look both more rugged and more childish simultaneously. "As ready as one can be for Njord's trials," Thor replied. "The others are here. Everyone's aboard. Korg's checking the weapons, Brunhilde's in the crow's nest, and Loki's doing some last-minute magic stuff in the navigation room." Luffy counted off on his fingers. "We're just waiting for you. Then let us not delay." Thor clapped his hand on Luffy's shoulder. "Lead on, Captain." Luffy's face split into a grin wide enough to seem almost unnatural on anyone else. With a whoop of joy, he bounded to the helm where an ornate will carved from a single piece of enchanted ash wood awaited him. The crew took their positions, Sif at Luffy's side as sailing master, Korg manning the forecastle where Naglfar's primary weapons were controlled, Brunhilde above in the crow's nest, her Valkyrie senses attuned to threats from any direction. Thor stood ready amidships, Mjolnir hanging from his belt, while Loki emerged from below decks to take his place near the stern, his hands glowing faintly with completed enchantments. "Cast off," Luffy ordered, his voice carrying the authority that emerged whenever he truly embraced his role as captain. The command was almost unnecessary. Naglfar's enchanted ropes began untying themselves the moment he spoke, the gangplank withdrawing of its own accord. "You know," Thor commented to Loki as the ship pulled away from the dock, "I'm still not entirely certain what Father's enchantments actually did to this vessel." "Neither is he, I suspect," Loki replied. Naming it Naglfar was either incredibly foolish or remarkably inspired. "How so?" "In the legends, Naglfar will sail only when destiny demands it." Loki watched as the ship seemed to respond to Luffy's slightest touch on the wheel, the sails filling with wind that blew precisely from the direction needed. "It appears our brother's vessel has taken those legends to heart." The ship moved with unnatural speed and grace, slipping through Asgard's waters as if they were merely suggestions rather than physical substance. Within minutes, the Golden City receded behind them, and the dark line on the horizon grew more distinct, a wall of storm clouds that extended from sea to sky, marking the boundary of Njord's domain. Approaching the western fjord, Sif announced, consulting one of Loki's enchanted charts. "The storm front marks the entry point for the trial. Everyone hold on." Luffy called out cheerfully. "This might get bumpy." As if sensing his excitement, Naglfar surged forward with increased speed, cutting through the waves toward the waiting storm. The transition from calm to chaos came with shocking abruptness. One moment they sailed under clear skies, the next they plunged into a maelstrom of wind, rain, and lightning. "By the 9!" Korg exclaimed, bracing himself against the sudden pitching of the deck. "Bit dramatic, isn't he?" this sea god. Waves tall as Asgard's towers rose around them, threatening to swallow Naglfar whole. Lightning split the blackened sky, and winds howled with voices that sounded almost like laughter. Through it all, Luffy stood at the helm, his feet somehow adhering to the wildly tilting deck, his face split in a manic grin as he wrestled with the wheel. Far from frightened, he looked utterly in his element. "This is awesome," he shouted over the storm's roar. "Hey Njord. Is this the best you've got? Perhaps don't taunt the primordial entity controlling the waters we're sailing on," Loki suggested dryly, maintaining his balance through a combination of magic and experience. Lightning answered Luffy's challenge, striking the water uncomfortably close to Naglfar's hull. The ship responded by somehow slipping sideways, avoiding the impact in a way that defied normal physics. "She's protecting herself," Thor realized, watching the vessel's movements with growing amazement. Father's enchantments made her almost alive. "All ships have souls," Brunhilde called down from her perch, where she clung with the practiced ease of a Valkyrie who had ridden flying horses through worse storms. "This one's is simply more awake than most." They plunged deeper into the storm, the outside world completely obscured by curtains of rain and mist. Normal navigation became impossible, even the sun's position was hidden, leaving them with no reference point. "Loki!" Sif called out. "Your instruments." Loki quickly produced the enchanted compass, which spun wildly before settling on a direction that seemed to lead directly into the heart of the maelstrom. "That way, though I question the wisdom of following it. That's where the adventure is," Luffy declared, spinning the wheel to follow the compass's indication. "Hold tight." Naglfar heeled sharply, nearly standing on her side before righting herself. The enchanted wood of her hull groaned but held against pressures that would have shattered ordinary vessels. "Something approaches from starboard," Brunhilde warned, her enhanced vision penetrating the gloom where others saw only chaos. A massive shape loomed suddenly out of the storm, a serpentine form that coiled through water and air alike, its scales glinting like wet obsidian in the lightning flashes. "Sea serpent." Thor identified it, reaching for Mjolnir. "No," Loki corrected, eyes narrowing. "Look at the patterning on its scales. That's a Krokantooth, a guardian creature bound to Njord's service. The first test, I'd wager." Finally. Luffy bounced with excitement. "Korg. Ready the harpoon launchers." "On it, Captain." The Kronan warrior swung the weapons around, the enchanted harpoons glowing with runes of binding and piercing. The serpent circled them, its movements creating new currents that pushed Naglfar toward a section of water that didn't look quite right. Even through the storm, they could see the water there swirled differently, forming a massive whirlpool. "It's hurting us toward that maelstrom," Sif realized. "We can't let it dictate our course." "We'll have to fight past it," Thor said, twirling Mjolnir to summon his own lightning in answer to the storms. "No." Luffy's voice cut through their planning. "Not yet." They turned to him in surprise. "What do you mean, not yet?" Sif demanded. "That creature is driving us into a whirlpool that could destroy even Naglfar." Luffy's eyes were fixed on the serpent, watching its movements with uncharacteristic intensity. "It's not attacking. It's guiding. Guiding us to our doom," Loki pointed out. "No." Luffy shook his head firmly. "This is a test, right? Njord wants to see if I understand the sea." His face broke into a sudden grin. "And I bet that whirlpool is exactly where we need to go." "You want to sail directly into a maelstrom?" Thor asked incredulously. "Yep." Luffy nodded enthusiastically. "Trust me." The crew exchanged glances. Despite his often chaotic methods, Luffy had developed an uncanny instinct for these situations over the years. His rubber brain seemed to work in ways that sometimes arrived at the right answer through completely incomprehensible reasoning. "Your call, Captain," Sif finally said, though her hand remained on her sword hilt. Luffy grinned and spun the wheel, pointing Naglfar directly at the massive whirlpool. Full speed ahead. The ship surged forward as if eager to obey, the enchanted wood thrumming beneath their feet. The serpent ceased its circling, watching with gleaming eyes as they willingly entered the maelstrom's pull. If we die, I'm holding you personally responsible in Valhalla, Loki informed his rubber brother. We're not gonna die. Luffy laughed as the ship began to spin, caught in the whirlpool's inexorable grip. This is just the entrance. Entrance to what? Thor had to shout as the roar of water grew deafening. Luffy just grinned wider as Naglfar spiraled inward, picking up speed until the world around them became a blur of water and mist. The pressure increased, the ship groaning under forces that threatened to tear it apart. Just when it seemed they must surely be destroyed, the center of the maelstrom opened like an eye, revealing not crushing depths but a tunnel of calm water that plunged straight downward. Hang on! Luffy shouted as Naglfar tipped forward and plummeted into the impossible vertical waterway. They fell, or sailed, downward for what seemed like minutes, the tunnel of water somehow maintaining its shape around them, defying gravity and common sense alike. Light changed around them, shifting from the stormy gray of the surface to a deep, luminescent blue. Then, with a final lurch that sent everyone except Luffy staggering, Naglfar leveled out and burst into an open space that left them momentarily speechless. They had entered an enormous undersea cavern, a hidden realm beneath Asgard's waters. The space stretched for miles, illuminated by glowing coral and phosphorescent creatures that drifted through water clear as crystal. Fantastic structures rose from the seafloor, palaces and temples built from coral, pearl, and materials unknown to surface dwellers. The Underdeep, Sif breathed in awe. It's supposed to be a myth, Njord's hidden kingdom beneath Asgard's seas. Not a myth anymore. Luffy laughed, delighted by the discovery. See? I told you the whirlpool was the way in. How could you possibly have known that? Loki demanded, visibly annoyed that Luffy's random instinct had proven correct. Luffy shrugged. The serpent wasn't trying to eat us, so it had to be showing us something. And if this is a test about understanding the sea, then going with the flow made sense. Your logic continues to defy comprehension, Loki muttered. Their amazement at the hidden realm was cut short as a deep voice boomed around them, seeming to come from the water itself. You have found the entrance to my domain, Rubber Prince. Njord's voice resonated through the cavern. The first step is complete. But finding the path is the simplest of tasks. Now you must prove your worth to sail these waters. The water before Naglfar's bow churned and rose, forming a massive humanoid shape, Njord himself, materializing as a titan of living water, his beard formed from swirling currents, his eyes deep whirlpools of ancient power. Whoa, you're huge! Luffy exclaimed, apparently unintimidated by the water god's spectacular entrance. Njord's watery features formed something resembling a smile. Size matters little in the depths. What matters is understanding. His liquid arm swept across the underwater realm. These are the true waters of Asgard, boy. The hidden currents that flow beneath what surface dwellers see. Few are permitted to witness them. It's amazing. Luffy bounced excitedly at the wheel. Are there sea monsters down here? Can we explore? Is there treasure? Njord chuckled, the sound bubbling through his watery form. Eager as a young dolphin. But you must earn the right to explore these realms. His expression hardened. Your first true trial begins now. Follow the path of currents to the Pearl Throne. But beware, the way changes with the tides, and not all who dwell here welcome surface vessels. With that cryptic warning, Njord's form collapsed back into the water, leaving only ripples to mark where he had stood. Well, that was appropriately dramatic, Loki commented. Any idea what this path of currents might be? As if in answer, the water before them began to glow, a luminescent trail appearing beneath the surface, winding away through the vast underwater realm. I'm guessing it's that, Luffy pointed unnecessarily. How are we supposed to follow an underwater path? Thor asked. Naglfar may be enchanted, but it can't submerge. Actually. Luffy grinned mischievously. I had some extra modifications made. He released the wheel and bounded to a section of the quarterdeck where an ornate lever protruded. Everybody grab onto something solid. Luffy, what are you? Sif began, but her question died as Luffy pulled the lever with gleeful abandon. The ship shuddered beneath them. Sections of the hull reconfigured, plates shifting and locking into new positions. The masts folded downward, sails furling automatically. Most startlingly, a transparent dome began to form over the deck, made from some crystal-like substance that emerged from hidden compartments. What in the nine realms? Thor exclaimed as the transformation completed. Underwater mode. Luffy announced proudly. The dwarves helped design it after I kept bothering them about sea adventures. You turned a sailing vessel into a submersible, Loki said flatly. Without telling any of us. I wanted it to be a surprise. Luffy bounced back to the helm, which had transformed into a more complex control station. Isn't it cool? It's completely insane, Sif stated. Which means it suits you perfectly. Luffy took this as a compliment, beaming as he manipulated the new controls. Water began to rise around the transparent dome as Naglfar sank beneath the surface, the enchanted hull somehow maintaining perfect buoyancy control. Diving now. Follow that glowy path. The ship submerged completely, transforming from sailing vessel to underwater craft with remarkable grace. Through the crystal dome, they watched in awe as the fantastical underwater kingdom surrounded them. Schools of bizarre fish swam past, creatures half familiar and half alien. The structures they'd glimpsed from the surface revealed themselves to be even more intricate up close, entire cities built for beings that lived their lives beneath the waves. This is incredible, Brunhilde murmured, descending from her now enclosed crow's nest to join the others on the main deck. Even the Valkyrie have never seen these realms. Stay alert, Thor cautioned. Njord warned that not all inhabitants would be welcoming. As if summoned by his words, movement flickered in the waters around them. Shapes darted between distant structures, humanoid figures with fins instead of feet, scaled skin, and webbed hands clutching tridents and spears. Njord sea folk, Sif identified them. They guard the deeper waters of Asgard. They don't look very friendly, Korg observed as the aquatic warriors began to swim closer, their expressions clearly hostile. They're just protecting their home, Luffy said with unexpected insight. We're strangers here. He studied the approaching sea folk thoughtfully, then made a decision. Instead of accelerating to flee or preparing for battle, he slowed Naglfar to a halt and moved to the front of the dome. There, visible to the approaching warriors, he removed his straw hat and bowed deeply in their direction, a gesture of respect he'd rarely shown to anyone in Asgard. What are you doing? Thor asked, tensed for conflict. Showing respect, Luffy replied simply. This is their sea, not ours. We're just passing through. The sea folk slowed their approach, clearly surprised by the gesture. After a tense moment, one who appeared to be their leader swam closer to the dome, examining Luffy with eyes adapted to the ocean depths. Luffy straightened from his bow and met the creature's gaze without fear but without challenge either, simply one captain acknowledging another. He pointed to the glowing path, then gestured along its length, his intention clear: we seek only to follow the path, not to invade. The sea folk leader studied him for a long moment before making a complex gesture with webbed hands. The warriors around them didn't withdraw but adjusted their formation to flank Naglfar rather than block its path. An escort, Sif realized. They're going to accompany us. See. Being nice works sometimes. Luffy replaced his hat and returned to the controls. Let's go. But slowly, don't want them thinking we're trying to run away. Under the watchful eyes of their new escorts, Naglfar continued along the luminescent path. The underwater journey was breathtaking. They passed through groves of coral that towered like forests, navigated canyons where the seafloor dropped away into lightless abysses, and sailed through schools of jellyfish whose tentacles glowed with mesmerizing patterns. The path of currents appears to be taking us deeper into the realm, Loki noted after they'd traveled for some time. Those structures ahead seemed to be a major settlement. A vast underwater city loomed before them, built into the side of a massive reef. Unlike the smaller settlements they'd passed, this one showed clear signs of ancient power. The buildings were constructed from materials that shimmered with enchantment, and at its center rose a massive dome that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Their seafolk escort signaled for them to continue following the path, which led directly toward the central dome. "I'm guessing that's where we'll find this Pearl Throne," Luffy said, maneuvering Naglfar carefully through the city's outskirts. Underwater inhabitants stopped to stare at the strange vessel from the surface, some pointing in wonder, others shrinking away in fear. "Remember," Thor cautioned, "this is still a test. Njord may have more challenges waiting inside." "Bring it on," Luffy declared confidently. "We're doing great so far." The glowing path led them to a massive opening in the central dome. Their escorts gestured for them to proceed inside, then took up positions at the entrance, clearly indicating they would go no further. "Looks like we're on our own from here," Sif observed. "Good. More adventure for us." Luffy guided Naglfar through the opening, which led to a vast interior space. The dome contained a single enormous chamber, a throne room built for underwater beings. Water filled every part of it, but strange magic created currents and separations that formed distinct areas without physical barriers. At the chamber's center, elevated on a dais of coral and crystal, stood a massive throne formed from a single pearl larger than Naglfar itself, glowing with inner light. No figure sat upon the throne, but around it moved dozens of sea folk of obviously higher status than their escorts, nobles and courtiers of Njord's underwater realm, their scales more vibrant, their adornments more elaborate. "The Pearl Throne," Thor murmured. "So this is the heart of Njord's underwater kingdom. It's amazing." Luffy pressed against the crystal dome for a better look. "But where's Njord? Isn't this the end of the path?" The glowing trail they'd followed indeed ended at the foot of the throne, but no further instructions awaited them. "Perhaps we're meant to wait," Brunhilde suggested. "Or perhaps the trial isn't simply reaching the throne, but proving worthy of approaching it," Loki speculated. Luffy considered this, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Njord's testing if I understand the sea, right?" He studied the throne room, watching how the underwater courtiers moved through the various current-separated sections. "I think we need to show we understand their ways." "And how do you propose we do that?" Sif asked. "We can't exactly leave the ship underwater." "We don't need to." Luffy grinned suddenly. "Loki, can you make Naglfar look different from outside? Like, disguise it?" Loki raised an eyebrow. "Illusion is one of my specialties." "What did you have in mind?" "Make it look like a big fish or something that belongs here. Something that shows respect to them." Intrigued by Luffy's reasoning, Loki nodded and began weaving complex gestures. Green energy flowed from his hands, spreading across Naglfar's outer hull. They won't see a surface vessel anymore, but rather a ceremonial transport used by their own kind during important occasions. Perfect. Luffy guided Naglfar forward, approaching the throne with measured speed. "Now we just need to do the right greeting." He studied the underwater courtiers again, noting how they approached the throne, a specific pattern of movement, rising and dipping in the water in what appeared to be a ritualized bow. "Can you make Naglfar move like this?" he asked, mimicking the pattern with his hand. Sif watched his demonstration and nodded. The submersible controls should allow for that kind of maneuverability. "But Luffy, how do you know this is right?" "I don't," he admitted cheerfully. "But it makes sense. The sea has currents and flows. Their greeting shows they understand that. If we copy it, we show we understand too." His logic was strange but not entirely unsound. Following his instructions, Sif helped adjust the controls to guide Naglfar in the ceremonial approach pattern they'd observed. The ship dipped and rose through the water in a graceful sequence that mirrored the sea folk's movements. The underwater courtiers paused in their activities, watching the disguised vessel perform their sacred greeting with perfect precision. Murmurs bubbled through the water around them. As Naglfar completed the sequence and came to rest before the Pearl Throne, the water in the chamber began to swirl. Currents converged before the throne, coalescing into Njord's massive form once again. Clever, Rubber Prince, the sea god's voice resonated through the water and dome alike. You observed and adapted rather than imposing your surface dweller ways on my realm. That's what good pirates do. Luffy replied with a grin. We adapt to the sea, not the other way around. Njord's watery face showed surprise, then appreciation. Perhaps you do understand more than I credited. He gestured toward the Pearl Throne. You have completed the first trial. You found the hidden path and approached the throne with proper respect. So we passed. Luffy bounced excitedly. The first test only, Njord clarified. 2 more await you. But you have earned the right to sail my underwater realms as well as my surface waters, a privilege few Asgardians have ever been granted. Awesome. Does that mean there are underwater treasures we can find? And sea monsters to fight? Njord's laughter bubbled through the chamber. Your enthusiasm remains undiminished, I see. Yes, the Underdeep holds many wonders and dangers alike. But first, his expression turned serious again, you must return to the surface. The second trial awaits you at the Maelstrom Islands. Prove yourself there, and the final test will be revealed. With another gesture from the sea god, the glowing path reappeared, leading back the way they had come. Will it be as easy to leave as it was to enter? Thor asked warily. Nothing worth doing is ever easy, Thunderer, Njord replied. But the path is clear for those with eyes to see it. With those cryptic words, the sea god dissolved back into the surrounding waters, leaving them alone before the empty throne. Well, that was actually less deadly than I expected, Loki commented. Though I suspect the next trials won't be so forgiving. Doesn't matter. We'll handle whatever comes next. Luffy spun the submersible controls, turning Naglfar back toward the exit. This is exactly what being a pirate is all about, exploring amazing places no one else has seen. As they retraced their path through the underwater city, the sea folk watched with new interest, some even performing gestures that appeared to be signs of respect. Word of their successful audience at the Pearl Throne had clearly spread quickly. You know, Thor said quietly to Luffy as they navigated back toward the surface, your understanding of the sea and its people is surprisingly insightful for someone who claims to be terrible at navigation. Luffy grinned. Navigation is about maps and boring stuff. Understanding the sea is different. It's about feeling its freedom and respecting its power. He adjusted his hat. That's what Shanks taught me, back in my world. Thor nodded thoughtfully. This Shanks sounds like a wise man. The best pirate ever. Until I become Pirate King, anyway. Their return journey to the surface proved less eventful than their descent, though not without challenges. The underwater currents grew stronger as they approached the exit whirlpool, testing Naglfar's enhanced structure and Luffy's control. When they finally burst back into open air, emerging from the center of the maelstrom that had brought them down, they found the storm had subsided. Calm seas stretched before them, and in the distance, a cluster of jagged islands rose from the water, their next destination. The Maelstrom Islands, Sif identified them as Naglfar transformed back into its sailing configuration, masts rising, the crystal dome retracting. Said to be formed from the wreckage of vessels that displeased Njord. Cheerful, Loki commented. Let's not add Naglfar to their collection, Thor suggested dryly. No way. Luffy took the wheel again, his expression determined yet excited. We're just getting started. Set course for those islands. As Naglfar cut through the now calm waters toward their next challenge, none of them noticed the distortion in reality that briefly formed in the sky above, a tiny rift that opened and closed in seconds, observed by eyes from another dimension. On a distant station at the edges of known space, Tanalir Tyvan, known throughout the cosmos as the Collector, reviewed the footage his probe had captured. Fascinating, he murmured, watching the rubber being captain his enchanted vessel with such natural skill. A specimen from an entirely different dimensional plane, with properties unseen in our reality. And now enhanced by Asgardian influence. He turned to his assistant, a tall, pink-skinned humanoid with 4 arms. Prepare the containment unit. Special modifications will be required for this acquisition. Yes, Master Tyvan, the assistant bowed. When shall we proceed with collection? The collector studied the imagery again, watching as Luffy stretched his arm to impossible lengths to adjust a sail. Soon. But not yet. Let him complete these trials first. I wish to observe the full extent of his capabilities. His thin lips curved in a smile. After all, the most valuable specimens are those that have been tested. The Maelstrom Islands loomed larger as Naglfar approached, revealing their true nature, a nightmarish collection of jagged rocks, half-sunken shipwrecks, and narrow channels churning with opposing currents. The sky darkened again, not with storm clouds this time, but with an unnatural twilight that seemed centered on the islands themselves. This place feels wrong, Brunhilde commented, her Valkyrie senses alert to the metaphysical wrongness that permeated the area. There are spirits here, the souls of drowned sailors. Njord's trophies, Loki explained grimly. The islands are formed not just from wrecked ships but from the fates of those who failed his challenges throughout the millennia. That's messed up, Luffy frowned. Doesn't seem very respectful to the sea to use wrecked ships as decorations. Perhaps that's part of the test, Thor suggested. To see if you recognize the wrongness of it. Luffy's brow furrowed in thought. Maybe. But I bet there's more to it than that. He studied the forbidding islands carefully. The path isn't obvious this time. No glowy underwater trail to follow. Those channels between the islands might be navigable, Sif suggested, consulting her charts. Though they look treacherous. More than treacherous, Korg called down from his position at the bow. Look there, the water's moving in impossible directions. Going against gravity, it is. He pointed to where water visibly flowed upward along one island's edge, defying natural law. Enchantments, Loki confirmed after a moment's study. The entire archipelago is woven with sea magic. Currents that shouldn't exist, whirlpools that appear and disappear at random, even the air itself seems bound to Njord's will. Luffy absorbed this information, then nodded decisively. Then we can't rely on normal sailing. We need to think like Njord thinks. And how does a primordial sea god think? Sif asked skeptically. Like the sea. Luffy spread his arms wide. Unpredictable, always changing, but with patterns if you know how to look. He bounded up to the crow's nest, stretching his neck to an alarming length to peer at the islands from different angles. I think the islands themselves are the key. They're arranged in a pattern. Thor and Loki exchanged glances. Sometimes Luffy's rubber-brained insights were surprisingly accurate, but other times. What kind of pattern? Thor asked, willing to give his brother the benefit of the doubt. Luffy stretched back down to the deck. Loki, do you have something that can show us the islands from above? Like a bird's-eye view? Intrigued, Loki nodded and conjured an illusion in the air before them, a magical representation of the Maelstrom Islands as seen from above. The scattered landmasses did indeed form a distinctive shape. It's a spiral, Sif realized. The islands form a massive spiral pattern, with channels winding inward toward the center. Exactly. Luffy pointed excitedly. And look at those wrecks, they're all ships that tried to go straight through, not ships that followed the spiral. Now that he pointed it out, they could see the pattern in the destruction. Ships lay broken precisely where they had attempted to cross between loops of the spiral rather than following its natural flow. So we follow the spiral inward? Thor asked. Yep. Just like we followed the whirlpool down to the underwater city. The path isn't marked, but it's there if you understand the sea's patterns. Luffy took the wheel again, guiding Naglfar toward the outermost curve of the spiral. As they approached, the currents seemed to resist their progress, pushing against the hull with unexpected force. "The water doesn't want us to enter," Brunhilde observed. "No, it's testing us," Luffy corrected. "Making sure we're serious about following the path." He spun the wheel sharply, adjusting their angle of approach. "Korg. Unfurl the mainsail all the way." "You sure, Captain? Wind's getting pretty wild." "Trust me." As the mainsail fully deployed, the wind caught it with tremendous force. Naglfar heeled dangerously, timbers creaking, but then suddenly the resistance vanished. The ship surged forward as if pulled by an invisible hand, slipping into the outermost channel of the spiral with perfect alignment. It worked. Sif couldn't hide her surprise. "The islands recognized our intention," Loki realized. "Clever, brother. Very clever." Luffy just grinned, focusing on maintaining their course as Naglfar followed the spiral's curve. The channel narrowed as they progressed, forcing them to navigate with increasing precision. Strange phenomena manifested around them, water that rose in columns only to freeze in mid-air, sections of the sea that glowed with internal light, and most disturbingly, ghostly apparitions that rose from the wrecked ships they passed. "Don't look directly at them," Brunhilde warned as spectral sailors reached toward Naglfar with misty hands. "They seek to lure us off course." "Poor guys," Luffy frowned, genuinely saddened by their fate. "Hey, Njord," he shouted suddenly to the sky. "It's not very nice to keep these sailors trapped here. If this is about respect for the sea, maybe you should respect them too." His words echoed strangely across the waters, amplified by some property of the islands. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, to everyone's surprise, several of the ghostly figures seemed to nod in agreement before dissolving into mist that dissipated on the wind. "Did you just lecture a sea god on proper respect for sailors?" Thor asked incredulously. "Well, yeah. It's hypocritical to talk about respecting the sea while disrespecting the people who sail it." Luffy replied as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. A distant rumble suggested Njord had heard his criticism. Whether the sea god was angry or amused remained to be seen. They continued inward, following the tightening spiral. The challenges increased with each turn, massive waves appeared from nowhere, threatening to push them off course. Sudden waterspouts formed directly in their path, requiring split-second course corrections. Once, the water beneath them briefly transformed to ice, only to melt again as Naglfar's enchanted hull responded with warmth. Through it all, Luffy maintained his position at the wheel, his rubber body allowing him to adapt to the wild movements of the ship. When a particularly violent current nearly threw him overboard, he simply stretched his arms to wrap around the mainmast multiple times, anchoring himself while continuing to control the helm. "We're approaching the center," Sif called out as they completed another turn of the spiral. "But I don't see any clear destination, just more hazards." The innermost section of the spiral terminated in what appeared to be a solid wall of water, a vertical wave frozen in place, towering hundreds of feet above them. "That doesn't look passable," Thor observed, gripping Mjolnir in preparation for whatever came next. Luffy studied the impossible wave, his head tilted in that distinctive way that indicated his rubber brain was working on a problem from an angle only he understood. "It's a door," he decided finally. "A door? It's a wall of water that will crush us if it collapses," Loki pointed out. "No, look at the way the light plays through it." Luffy pointed at the subtle refractions visible within the water wall. "There's something on the other side. The real destination for the trial. Even if you're right, how do we pass through a solid wall of water?" Sif asked. Luffy thought for a moment, then brightened. "The same way we entered the Underdeep. We have to show we understand the sea and trust it completely." Before anyone could question this logic, Luffy spun the wheel, aiming Naglfar directly at the center of the towering water wall. "Luffy!" Thor shouted in alarm. "What are you doing?" "Taking the leap of faith." Luffy called back, eyes shining with excitement and absolute conviction. "Everyone hold on. Naglfar picked up speed, racing towards certain destruction with her captain grinning maniacally at the helm. The crew braced themselves, trusting Luffy despite the apparent madness of his action. Just as they were about to impact the water wall, Luffy shouted at the top of his lungs, "Njord. We respect the sea and accept its challenge." For a heart-stopping moment, the wall remained solid before them, Naglfar's bow mere feet from impact. Then, impossibly, the waters parted, not violently, but gracefully, forming an archway that revealed what lay beyond. A hidden cove nestled at the spiral's heart, perfectly circular and calm as glass. At its center rose a small island with a single ancient oak tree, its branches heavy with golden apples that glowed with inner light. The Golden Harbor, Sif breathed in awe. It's supposed to be a myth, Njord's private sanctuary where the apples of immortality grow by the sea rather than in Idun's gardens. Naglfar passed through the water archway, which closed behind them with a gentle splash. The ship glided across the preternaturally still waters of the cove, coming to rest at a perfect stone dock that extended from the small island. "We did it!" Luffy cheered, throwing his arms up victoriously. "See? Understanding the sea means trusting it sometimes." Or perhaps understanding Njord's twisted sense of humor, Loki muttered, though he looked relieved and impressed despite himself. They disembarked onto the island, approaching the ancient oak with cautious reverence. The golden apples hanging from its branches pulsed with light in a rhythm like heartbeats. "What now?" Thor wondered aloud. "Do we take an apple as proof we reached the center?" "That would be theft," a familiar voice answered as Njord materialized before them, not as a water construct this time, but in physical form. The sea god appeared as an ancient, powerfully built man with a beard of silver green that moved like seaweed underwater. His eyes held the depths of ocean trenches, and his skin shifted subtly with patterns like light playing through shallow waters. Luffy stepped forward, adjusting his straw hat. "We completed your second trial. We followed the spiral and found the hidden harbor." "Indeed you did," Njord acknowledged. "And more impressively, you questioned my treatment of fallen sailors, something few have dared." "Well, it wasn't right," Luffy said simply. "If you want people to respect the sea, you should respect them too." Njord studied him thoughtfully. "You continue to surprise me, Rubber Prince. You navigate by instinct rather than science, yet you find paths others miss. You challenge ancient customs while honoring deeper truths." He gestured to the golden apples. "These are not your prize, not yet. But you have earned the right to proceed to the final trial." "Great! What is it?" Luffy bounced eagerly. "Combat," Njord stated bluntly. Luffy's face lit up. "Now you're talking. Who am I fighting?" "You." In a manner of speaking, Njord said with a smile that held little warmth. "Return to your ship. When you leave this harbor, you will face my champions, the greatest predators of Asgard seas. Defeat them, and the final prize will be yours, along with my acknowledgement of your right to sail any waters as you please." "Sounds fun." Luffy cracked his knuckles excitedly. "You truly are a strange one," Njord remarked, his expression unreadable. "But we shall see if your confidence survives contact with my champions." With that ominous statement, the sea god dissolved into seafoam that was carried away on a sudden breeze. "He certainly has a flair for dramatic exits," Loki observed dryly. "So we're fighting sea monsters. Awesome." Luffy was already hurrying back toward Naglfar, energized by the prospect of combat. "I've been waiting for some real action." The others followed more cautiously. "These champions are likely to be formidable," Thor warned as they reboarded the ship. "Njord commands beasts that have terrorized Asgard's waters since time immemorial." "Good. It wouldn't be a proper test if they were weaklings." Luffy took his position at the helm. "Everyone to battle stations. This is gonna be epic." As Naglfar pulled away from the dock, the peaceful harbor began to change. The still waters churned, darkness spreading beneath the surface. The water archway through which they had entered reopened, but what lay beyond was no longer the spiral of islands. Instead, they saw open sea under a sky dark with gathering storm clouds. "Whatever we're facing, it's out there waiting for us," Sif said, strapping on her shield. "Then let's not keep them waiting." Luffy guided Naglfar through the archway, his face set in an eager grin. The moment they emerged, the world seemed to explode around them. The sea erupted as massive forms broke the surface, 3 enormous creatures that circled Naglfar with predatory intent. The triumvirate of the deeps, Thor identified them, raising Mjolnir. Njord's most feared servants. The first was a serpent similar to but vastly larger than the one that had guided them to the Underdeep, its coils stretched for hundreds of yards, obsidian scales gleaming wetly. The second resembled a kraken, tentacles thick as ancient trees writhing above the water. The third defied easy description, part shark, part dragon, its maw lined with teeth the size of swords, wings of leathery skin allowing it to launch itself from the water in devastating attacks. "They're huge!" Luffy exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. "This is gonna be the best fight ever." Before anyone could formulate a battle plan, the serpent struck, its massive head lunging toward Naglfar's bow with frightening speed. Korg responded instantly, firing the forward harpoon launchers. The enchanted weapon struck true but barely penetrated the creature's armored scales. "Conventional weapons won't be enough," Thor shouted, whirling Mjolnir to summon lightning. The kraken attacked next, tentacles slamming down on the deck from multiple directions. Sif and Brunhilde moved in perfect coordination, severing several appendages with their blades, but more replaced them immediately. "Loki. Defensive spells," Thor commanded as he released a massive lightning bolt at the serpent. The electricity struck the creature, causing it to recoil momentarily but doing little lasting damage. These were no ordinary beasts but magical entities bound to Njord's will, resistant to conventional attacks. Through it all, Luffy remained at the helm, his expression changing from excitement to focused calculation. He watched the movements of the 3 creatures, noting their patterns and coordination. "They're hurting us," he realized suddenly. "Working together to push us somewhere specific." Indeed, the combined attacks of the 3 champions had forced Naglfar into a retreat that was taking them toward a section of sea where the water swirled ominously, another whirlpool, but one that promised destruction rather than passage. "We need a plan," Sif called out as she deflected another tentacle strike with her shield. "I have one," Luffy replied, suddenly releasing the wheel. "Thor. Take the helm." Without waiting for acknowledgement, Luffy launched himself toward the mainmast, climbing it with remarkable speed. At the top, he stretched his neck to observe the battlefield from above, confirming his suspicions. "Everyone listen up," he shouted down. "They're working together, but they're not protecting themselves from each other. We need to make them hit each other." It was a simple observation but tactically brilliant. The 3 creatures maintained perfect spacing from one another, coordinating their attacks on Naglfar but never crossing paths. "Loki. Can you create illusions of us in different locations?" "Of course," Loki replied, immediately grasping Luffy's plan. "Phantom targets to confuse their coordination." "Thor. When I give the signal, hit the water between the serpent and the shark dragon with your biggest lightning bolt." Thor nodded, understanding dawning. "Creating a steam cloud for concealment." "Clever, brother." Luffy's rubber face split in a confident grin. "Korg. Aim for the kraken's eyes when the lightning hits." "Brunhilde, Sif, get ready to cut the shark dragon's wings when it surfaces." "And Loki, make lots of fake Naglfars." With everyone assigned roles, Luffy launched himself from the mast, arcing high above the battle. At the apex of his jump, he filled his lungs with air and bellowed, "Now." Thor released a massive lightning strike into the water exactly where Luffy had indicated. The sea exploded into a vast cloud of steam and spray, temporarily obscuring visibility. Simultaneously, Loki's magic created half a dozen phantom ships scattered across the battlefield. The champions of Njord faltered in their perfect coordination, momentarily confused by the multiple targets and loss of visibility. The shark dragon rose above the steam cloud, seeking a clear view, exactly as Luffy had predicted. Gum Gum Battle Axe. Luffy's stretched leg slammed down on the creature's head with devastating force, enhanced by both gravity and his Asgardian training. The impact drove the beast back down into the water directly in the path of the serpent's next attack. Unable to adjust in time, the serpent collided with its fellow champion. The kraken, responding to the chaos, lashed out blindly, its tentacles wrapping around both creatures in its confusion. "It's working!" Luffy shouted gleefully as he plummeted back toward Naglfar. "Keep going." The crew executed their roles perfectly. Korg's harpoons found the kraken's massive eyes, sending it into a frenzy of pain. Sif and Brunhilde launched themselves at the shark dragon's wings when it surfaced again, their enchanted blades severing the leathery membranes. Thor's lightning continued to create chaos and confusion while Loki's illusions multiplied, drawing attacks in all directions. Luffy landed back on deck, his body coiling like a spring. "Get ready for the big finish," he called to his crew. "Thor! Charge me up!" Thor understood immediately. He directed a controlled lightning bolt directly at Luffy, who didn't dodge but welcomed the electricity. His rubber body absorbed the energy, glowing with power in a technique they had developed during years of training together. Gum. Luffy's arms stretched backward to impossible lengths, the stored lightning crackling along his limbs. Thunder Bazooka. His electrified fists shot forward with explosive force, striking the tangled mass of champions simultaneously. The concentrated impact, combined with Thor's lightning, created a shockwave that separated the three creatures and sent them reeling. "Now!" Luffy shouted. Full speed ahead, straight through the middle. Thor spun the wheel, and Naglfar surged forward, cutting directly through the gap between the disoriented champions. The ship's enchanted hull glowed as it passed, responding to the chaotic energies around it. For a breathless moment, it seemed they would make a clean escape. Then the serpent recovered, lunging one final time at Naglfar's stern. "Oh no you don't." Luffy leapt to meet the attack, his body expanding to massive size, another technique developed in Asgard. Gum Gum Giant Pistol. His enlarged fist collided with the serpent's head in a thunderous impact that echoed across the water. The creature recoiled, stunned by the unexpected power behind the blow. Luffy landed back on deck as Naglfar sped away from the defeated champions. Behind them, the three massive beasts retreated beneath the waves, their coordination broken, their attack repelled. "We did it!" Luffy whooped, bouncing around the deck in celebration. "That was amazing!" The crew, battered but triumphant, allowed themselves to share in his enthusiasm. Even Loki looked impressed by the effectiveness of Luffy's unconventional tactics. "I must admit," he said, straightening his somewhat disheveled clothing, "your combat instincts are rather remarkable, brother." "Indeed," Thor agreed, clapping Luffy on the shoulder hard enough to stagger anyone else. "You saw the pattern none of us recognized and turned their strength against them. That's what being a good captain is about," Luffy declared. "Knowing your crew's strengths and the enemy's weaknesses." Before they could celebrate further, the sea before them began to churn. This time, however, no monsters emerged. Instead, the waters rose to form Njord's massive figure once more, towering over Naglfar with an expression that might have been either anger or respect. "You have defeated my champions," the sea god's voice boomed across the waves. "Not through superior strength alone, but through wit and teamwork, qualities worthy of a true captain." "So does that mean I pass?" Luffy asked eagerly. "It means you have completed all 3 trials," Njord confirmed. "You have navigated the hidden paths of the Underdeep, found the center of the Maelstrom Islands, and defeated the Triumvirate of the Deeps. Few in the history of Asgard have accomplished even one of these feats." Njord's watery form leaned closer. "I acknowledge your right to sail any waters of Asgard, Luffy Odinson. Your vessel, Naglfar, is welcome in all my domains, above and below the waves. Awesome! Luffy pumped his fists in victory. So I'm officially a pirate captain now? Njord's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. You are something more unusual than that, I think. But yes, by the standards of your world and mine, you have earned the title of captain. The sea god raised his massive hand, palm open. In it materialized a golden apple, one of the fruits from the oak tree in the hidden harbor. Your prize, as promised. The apple of the sea. Unlike Aiden's apples which grant youth and vitality, this fruit bestows something different, attunement with the waters of all realms. Consume it, and you will never lose your way upon any sea, never fear drowning, never be rejected by any waters you sail. The apple floated down to land gently on Naglfar's deck. Luffy picked it up, examining the glowing fruit with curiosity. So it's a mystery apple that makes me better at sailing, he summarized in his characteristic way of simplifying complex concepts. In essence, yes, Njord confirmed, amusement coloring his voice. Though its power extends beyond mere navigation. Luffy nodded and took a bite without hesitation. The fruit's flesh glowed briefly as he chewed, and a subtle change came over him, nothing visible, but the crew could sense a new harmony between Luffy and the sea around them, as if they had become aligned on some fundamental level. Whoa, Luffy blinked, looking around with new awareness. The sea. I can kind of feel it now. Like it's talking to me. The waters will guide you if you listen, Njord explained. Though knowing you, Rubber Prince, you will likely still follow your own path regardless. Of course. That's what freedom is all about. Luffy took another bite, finishing the apple. But it's nice to understand the sea better. Thanks, old Seabeard. Njord's expression flickered between offense at the nickname and grudging amusement. You remain impertinent to the end. But perhaps that too is part of your charm. The sea god's form began to dissolve back into the waves. Sail well, Captain Luffy. We shall meet again when the tides demand it. As Njord disappeared, the stormy skies cleared, revealing the golden city of Asgard in the distance, glowing in the late afternoon sun. Home, Thor observed with satisfaction. And victory. The best kind of adventure, Luffy agreed, taking the helm once more. We explored awesome places, fought giant monsters, and everybody's okay. As Naglfar turned toward Asgard, riding the waves with newfound harmony thanks to the apple of the sea, none of them noticed the brief shimmer in the air above, another rift opening momentarily, another glimpse from distant eyes. None except Heimdall, standing watch on the Bifrost, whose all-seeing gaze narrowed with concern at what he observed beyond the rift. They come, he murmured to himself. And they have seen. Chapter 3, Between Realms. The celebrations lasted 3 days following Luffy's triumph over Njord's trials. Asgard's halls rang with tales of Naglfar's journey to the Underdeep and the defeat of the Triumvirate, each retelling growing more elaborate. By the third night, according to some of the drunker warriors, Luffy had single-handedly wrestled the Kraken into submission while simultaneously conducting complex peace negotiations with an army of mere people. Luffy didn't bother correcting these exaggerations, partly because he enjoyed the stories, but mostly because his mouth stayed constantly full of the feast's offerings. If anything, his already legendary appetite had grown even more insatiable after consuming the apple of the sea. Is the entire boar not enough? Sif asked, watching him stuff a fifth helping into his impossibly stretching cheeks. Save some for the rest of Asgard. MFGHT. Luffy attempted to respond before swallowing his massive mouthful. Food tastes better after adventure. Everyone knows that. Thor laughed, raising his tankard. He's earned his feast. To my brother, conqueror of the sea. The hall erupted in cheers, though Loki, seated beside their father, maintained a more measured expression. His eyes tracked the movements of messengers who periodically approached Odin's throne, delivering whispered reports that caused the Allfather's expression to grow increasingly grim. When Heimdall entered the hall and strode purposefully toward Odin, Loki nudged Thor and nodded toward the development. Thor's celebration dimmed as he noticed the gatekeeper's unusual presence at the feast. "Something's wrong," Thor murmured. "Been wrong for hours," Luffy replied through another mouthful, surprising both brothers with his awareness. "Odin's gotten 17 reports since sunset. Heimdall wouldn't leave his post unless it's super serious." Loki raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. For all Luffy's apparent obliviousness, he missed little when it mattered. Their suspicions proved correct when Odin rose from his throne, striking Gungnir once against the floor. The sound reverberated through the hall, bringing instant silence. "The celebration ends," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of command. "All warriors to their stations. Council members to the war room. My sons," I found Thor, Loki, and Luffy, "come with me. Now." The hall erupted in disciplined movement as warriors dispersed to their assigned positions. Volstagg looked mournfully at his half-finished plate before reluctantly joining the exodus. Luffy grabbed one last massive handful of meat before bouncing to his feet. "Finally. Something's happening. I was getting bored just eating and drinking." "Only you would find 3 days of feast and celebration boring," Loki remarked as they followed Odin out of the hall. "Not boring exactly," Luffy clarified, swallowing his final mouthful. "Just, not moving forward. Adventures shouldn't stop for too long." Thor clapped his hand on Luffy's shoulder. "I fear you may get more adventure than you bargained for, brother." The war room pulsed with tension. Asgard's highest generals and council members gathered around a massive table where a three-dimensional projection of the 9 realms rotated slowly, certain areas glowing with ominous red light. Odin stood at the head of the table, Frigga at his side, both wearing expressions that silenced even Luffy's usual chatter. Heimdall towered nearby, his golden eyes reflecting the projection's light in unsettling patterns. "The rifts are multiplying," Odin began without preamble once his sons entered. "What began as isolated incidents has become a pattern. The barriers between realms weaken by the hour." Heimdall stepped forward. "I count 73 breaches in the last day alone. Most seal themselves within minutes, but each remains open longer than the last. And something reaches through." The projection shifted, focusing on a particular rift that had appeared near the edge of Asgard. The image showed a shadowy appendage, not quite hand, not quite claw, extending briefly before the tear sealed. "What is that?" Thor asked, leaning forward to study the projection. "Death's touch," Heimdall replied grimly. "Or so I believe. The realm beyond that particular rift bears the signature of Helheim." A murmur ran through the assembled council members. "Hela," Loki breathed, understanding immediately. "But she's bound within her realm by Father's magic. Unless the weakening barriers provide an opportunity she has awaited for millennia," Odin confirmed. "My binding spells require stable boundaries between realms. As these rifts multiply, her restraints grow weaker." "Who's Hela?" Luffy asked, picking his nose absently. Several counselors looked scandalized at both the question and the gesture, but Odin merely sighed. "My firstborn," he replied, surprising many who had never heard him acknowledge this openly. "Goddess of death and once my executioner. Her ambition grew too great, her bloodthirst too consuming. I was forced to imprison her in Helheim and strike her from our history." "You have a crazy murder sister." Luffy's eyes widened as he looked at Thor and Loki. "And you guys never mentioned her." "We only learned of her existence ourselves relatively recently," Thor admitted. "Father keeps certain chapters of Asgard's history, closely guarded." "Wow, your family's even more complicated than mine." Luffy seemed almost impressed rather than concerned. "So this death goddess is trying to escape through these rifty things." "Rifts," Loki corrected automatically. "And yes, that appears to be her strategy. Though she would need a significant breach to physically cross over." Heimdall's golden gaze shifted to Luffy. "Which brings us to the second matter. The origin point of the most stable rifts appears to be the dimensional fold containing Prince Luffy's homeworld. Luffy straightened immediately, his casual demeanor vanishing. My world? You found it? We have pinpointed its location with certainty, Heimdall confirmed. The dimensional barriers between our realms were already thin where you crossed over. Now they grow thinner still. But that's good news, right? Luffy bounced excitedly. It means I can go home. Not exactly, Odin cautioned. The rifts are unpredictable, dangerous. And if Hela is aware of them, she may be attempting to influence their formation from her side. Two-way doors, Luffy summarized with unexpected clarity. If I can go home through them, bad stuff can come from either side too. Precisely, Odin looked pleased at Luffy's understanding. Including Hela's forces, should she manage to direct a rift toward Helheim. The projection shifted again, showing multiple rifts forming and collapsing across different points in the 9 realms. One particular cluster appeared near the edges of Helheim. She's testing the boundaries, Frigga observed. Searching for weaknesses. And there's another player, Heimdall added grimly. The entity I observed watching through the rifts has become more active. It appears to be attempting to stabilize certain breaches from its side. The collector, Thor surmised. Indeed. His interest appears focused primarily on rifts near Prince Luffy or his ship. Luffy frowned. This collector guy really needs to find a better hobby. I think he believes you would be the centerpiece of his collection, Loki remarked dryly. The only rubber man in the 9 realms, now enhanced by Asgardian training and magic. Well, he can't have me. Luffy declared emphatically. I've got stuff to do. Important pirate stuff. Despite the gravity of the situation, several council members couldn't suppress smiles at Luffy's indignation. In the years since his arrival, his single-minded determination had become endearing rather than merely baffling. Odin tapped Gungnir once, returning focus to the matter at hand. We face multiple threats converging. Hela seeking escape from her prison. The collector pursuing his obsessions. And most concerning, the fundamental stability of the realms themselves at risk from these multiplying rifts. What do we do? Thor asked, ready as always for action. We must investigate the rifts directly, Odin replied. Determine their cause, and if possible, stabilize the barriers between worlds. And if Hela attempts to break through? Loki asked. Then we must be prepared to face her. Odin's expression darkened. She will not stop at Asgard if freed. All realms would fall under her shadow, including yours, Luffy. Luffy's usual carefree expression vanished, replaced by the serious captain's face that emerged in true crises. Then we stop her. No way I'm letting some death lady mess with my world. Your determination is admirable, Odin acknowledged. But Hela's power is beyond anything you've faced. Even I could not defeat her, only imprison her. Then we'll just have to be smarter, not stronger, Luffy replied with simple confidence. That's how we beat Njord's champions. Thor nodded in agreement. Luffy's right. We need not defeat Hela in direct combat if we can prevent her escape in the first place. To that end, Odin gestured, and the projection zoomed out to show a particular cluster of rifts forming near Asgard's edge. You must investigate these breaches. They appear more stable than most, possibly due to the collector's interference. Heimdall believes they may lead close to Luffy's world. We'll take Naglfar. Luffy declared immediately. She can handle weird magic stuff now, especially after I ate that golden apple. The enchanted vessel would indeed be suited for such a journey, Odin agreed. But this mission requires more than simply Naglfar and her standard crew. He rose from his seat, signaling the council members to leave. The rest of our preparations will proceed as discussed. Now, I would speak with my sons alone. As the council members filed out, Odin's demeanor shifted subtly. The stern ruler receded slightly, revealing the concerned father beneath. This undertaking carries great risk, he said once they were alone save for Frigga and Heimdall. You will be venturing into the spaces between realms, places where the laws of nature become suggestions at best. If you encounter Hela's forces, or the Collector's agents, we can handle it. Luffy declared confidently. We've got Thor's lightning, Loki's magic, and my rubber powers. Plus Naglfar's super tough now. Your confidence is admirable if somewhat misplaced, Loki remarked, though without his usual sarcasm. Odin raised his hand. Before you depart, I have gifts that may aid your journey. He gestured, and Frigga stepped forward, carrying an ornate chest. For Thor, Odin nodded to his eldest, who stepped forward. Frigga opened the chest and removed a set of vambraces inscribed with ancient runes. Forged from the same URU metal as Mjolnir, these will amplify your control over lightning and allow you to focus it with greater precision, useful in the chaotic energies between realms. Thor accepted them with a respectful nod, immediately securing them to his forearms where they seemed to pulse with contained power. For Loki, Odin continued as his second son approached somewhat warily. Frigga produced a small crystal sphere that shifted colors continuously. The Prism of Pathways. It reveals hidden doorways between worlds that even Heimdall's gaze cannot penetrate. Your skill with magic makes you best suited to wield it. Loki accepted the artifact with barely concealed surprise at receiving such a valuable gift. Thank you, father. Finally, Odin turned to Luffy. And for you, my youngest son. Luffy bounded forward eagerly. Is it a weapon? Or armor? Or something that shoots lasers? Odin's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. Nothing so conventional. Frigga removed the final item from the chest, what appeared to be a simple length of golden cord. Luffy's excitement visibly dimmed. A rope? The thread of binding, Odin corrected. Spun from the same enchanted materials that once bound Fenrir. What it captures, it holds, no matter how powerful, no matter what form they take. Even gods cannot break it. Luffy's eyes widened as he gently took the cord. Despite its delicate appearance, he could feel tremendous power humming within it. So I could tie up anyone with this? Even super strong people? If you can get it around them, yes, Odin confirmed. It expands or contracts according to the wielder's need and will return to your hand if called. I suspect your unique abilities make you particularly suited to use it, creatively. A slow grin spread across Luffy's face as he grasped the tactical possibilities. This is way better than lasers. He immediately wrapped it around his waist like a belt, where it seemed to settle comfortably. These gifts carry great power, Odin cautioned. Use them wisely and well. The fate of multiple realms may depend on your success. When do we leave? Thor asked, already mentally preparing for the journey. Tomorrow at dawn, Odin replied. Naglfar is being prepared as we speak. Choose your additional crew carefully, you will need skill and courage in equal measure. I've already got the best crew. Luffy declared proudly. Sif, Brunhilde, Korg, they all proved themselves against Njord's trials. A solid foundation, Odin agreed. But perhaps one more member might prove useful. He turned to Heimdall. Your sight would be invaluable on this mission, Guardian. Heimdall's golden eyes flickered with surprise. The Bifrost would be left unguarded, my king. I will take up that duty temporarily, Odin stated. These circumstances are extraordinary, and your abilities may make the difference between success and failure. After a moment's consideration, Heimdall nodded his acceptance. It is decided then, Odin concluded. Rest tonight, for tomorrow you sail into uncharted waters, both literally and figuratively. As they prepared to leave, Frigga stepped forward, embracing each of her sons in turn, including Luffy, who still sometimes looked surprised when included in such maternal gestures. Come back safely, she murmured. All of you. We will, mother, Thor assured her. Don't worry. Luffy added cheerfully. Adventures always work out in the end. Loki merely inclined his head, though his expression softened momentarily at his mother's concern. As they left the war room, Luffy practically bounced with excitement. This is gonna be the best mission ever. We get to see my world, fight a death goddess, and escape a collector guy. Your definition of best continues to concern me, Loki remarked dryly. Come, Thor interjected. We should inform the others and prepare Naglfar. Dawn will arrive swiftly. True to Thor's prediction, morning came all too quickly. The sky remained dark as the crew assembled on Naglfar's deck, the first hints of dawn just barely lightening the eastern horizon. The ship had been outfitted for extended journey, additional supplies, weapons, and magical protections layered throughout her structure. Luffy stood at the bow, unusually quiet as he stared at the sky where the faintest shimmer occasionally revealed the location of one of the rifts Heimdall had identified. After 3 years in Asgard, the prospect of potentially seeing his home world again filled him with complicated emotions. Nervous? He turned to find Sif approaching, fully armored for the journey ahead. Nah. Luffy grinned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Just thinking. A dangerous pastime for you, she remarked with the dry humor that had developed between them over years of adventures. Very funny. He turned back to the distant rifts. I wonder if anything's changed back home. 3 years is a long time. For mortals, perhaps, Sif acknowledged. Though for Asgardians, it passes like a season. Yeah, you guys are super old, Luffy nodded sagely, ignoring her offended expression. But in my world, 3 years is plenty of time for everything to change. My friends might have given up on me. Someone else might have found the One Piece already. Do you truly believe that? She asked, studying him carefully. Luffy considered this, then shook his head firmly. Nope. My friends wouldn't give up. And I'm still gonna be Pirate King, even if I'm a little late getting started. Sif couldn't help smiling at his unshakable confidence. There's the Luffy we know. I was beginning to worry this mission had actually made you thoughtful. Hey. I can be thoughtful, he protested. I just save it for important stuff, like meat preparation and fighting strategies. Their banter was interrupted as Thor, Loki, and Heimdall boarded the ship, followed by Brunhilde and Korg. The crew was complete. All is prepared, Thor announced. Heimdall has identified the most stable rift for our passage. And I've reinforced Naglfar's magical protections, Loki added. Though I make no guarantees about what happens when we attempt to sail through a tear in reality. It'll be fine. Luffy bounced to the helm, his momentary introspection forgotten. Naglfar can handle anything. Right, ship? The vessel seemed to creak in agreement, the lion figurehead almost appearing to nod. The rift we seek lies 3 leagues east, Heimdall reported, his golden eyes fixed on something beyond normal sight. It has remained stable for nearly an hour, unusual longevity that suggests external influence. The collector, Thor surmised grimly. Most likely, Heimdall agreed. Though his purpose in stabilizing this particular breach remains unclear. Doesn't matter. We're taking advantage of it. Luffy spun the wheel enthusiastically. Cast off. Adventure awaits. The crew took their positions, Sif beside Luffy as sailing master, Thor and Brunhilde at the bow ready for whatever they might encounter, Korg manning the weapons, Loki tending to the magical defenses amidships, and Heimdall at the stern, his gaze continuously scanning for threats from any direction. Naglfar pulled away from Asgard's dock with grace that belied her size, her enchanted hull cutting through the water with unnatural speed. The apple of the sea's influence on Luffy became apparent as he guided the vessel with intuitive precision, sensing currents and winds that others couldn't perceive. As they approached the coordinates Heimdall had indicated, the air before them began to distort. What started as a barely perceptible shimmer grew into a visible tear in reality, edges ragged like torn fabric, the space within shifting with colors that hurt the eyes. That doesn't look very stable, Korg observed nervously. It's not, Heimdall confirmed. The collector's influence maintains it temporarily, but it could collapse at any moment. Then we'd better hurry. Luffy called out, increasing Naglfar's speed rather than slowing cautiously. Luffy! Thor shouted in alarm. Perhaps we should approach more carefully. No time. Adventure waits for no one. Luffy's face split in an excited grin as he aimed Naglfar directly at the center of the rift. Everyone hold on to something. I'm beginning to reconsider my life choices, Loki muttered, gripping the mainmast tightly. The rift loomed larger, its edges fluctuating wildly as they approached. Strange energies crackled around its perimeter, and through the opening, they caught distorted glimpses of somewhere else. Not a defined landscape, but a swirling chaos of possibility. The space between realms, Heimdall identified it. A dimensional corridor rather than a destination. Perfect. We'll navigate through it. Luffy declared as if sailing through the fabric of reality were no different than navigating a tricky reef. As Naglfar's bow touched the edge of the rift, reality seemed to stretch around them. The ship shuddered, timbers groaning under forces they were never designed to withstand. Light bent in impossible ways, and gravity itself seemed to stutter. I'm not sure this is, Thor began, but his words cut off as Naglfar lurched forward, suddenly pulled into the rift as if seized by an unseen hand. For a terrifying moment, everything disappeared. Sight, sound, sensation, all vanished as they passed through the barrier between worlds. Then reality crashed back with disorienting intensity, a kaleidoscope of sensory input that left even Heimdall momentarily stunned. They found themselves sailing through nothing. And everything. The space between realms appeared as a vast, impossible ocean of swirling energy and matter. Currents of raw possibility flowed around Naglfar's hull, while distant shapes that might have been islands or might have been mirages dotted the chaotic seascape. By the nine, Thor breathed, awed despite his centuries of cosmic travel. I've traversed realms via the Bifrost countless times, but never lingered in the in-between. The Bifrost creates a direct pathway, Heimdall explained, his golden eyes wide as he absorbed their surroundings. This is the raw medium through which all realms float like bubbles in a vast sea. It's awesome. Luffy shouted, his face alight with wonder. We're sailing the cosmic sea. I'm the first pirate to do this. That definitely helps my Pirate King qualifications. Despite the gravity of their mission, his enthusiasm proved infectious. Even Loki seemed fascinated rather than merely concerned as he studied the impossible landscape around them. The collector's influence has created a temporary pathway, Heimdall observed, pointing to what appeared to be a more organized current flowing through the chaos. That channel leads toward the dimensional fold containing Luffy's world. Then that's our course. Luffy adjusted the wheel, guiding Naglfar into the more stable flow. Let's see my world. As they sailed the cosmic current, strange phenomena manifested around them. Objects from different realities briefly materialized before dissolving back into the chaotic medium, trees made of crystal, animals with impossible anatomies, fragments of buildings from civilizations none of them recognized. Reality is thin here, Loki explained, watching a school of fish swim past whose bodies continuously transformed from flesh to metal to energy and back. Possibilities bleed through from countless worlds. Concentrate on maintaining our course, Thor cautioned Luffy, who had become distracted by the miraculous sights. We don't want to become lost in this place. I've got it. Luffy assured him, though his neck stretched to impossible length as he attempted to observe everything simultaneously. The ship knows where we're going. Indeed, Naglfar seemed to navigate the chaos with uncanny precision, her enchanted hull repelling the random manifestations that occasionally drifted too close. The thread of binding at Luffy's waist hummed with energy, responding to the power flowing around them. We approach a boundary, Heimdall announced after they had traveled for what might have been minutes or hours. Time itself seemed fluid in this place. Another rift forms ahead. Sure enough, the cosmic current they followed terminated in a distortion similar to the one they had entered through. Beyond it, they could see fragmentary glimpses of blue sky and ocean, a world that appeared far more normal than their current surroundings. My world? Luffy asked, suddenly breathless with anticipation. I believe so, Heimdall confirmed. The signature matches the dimensional frequency from which you originated. Luffy's hands tightened on the wheel, his usual boundless confidence momentarily shaken by the prospect of seeing home after 3 years. Steady, brother, Thor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Remember our mission. We cannot linger, only observe to better understand the rifts. Luffy nodded, determination returning to his features. Right. We see what's happening with these rifty things, figure out how to stop Hela, and keep both my worlds safe. As Naglfar approached the second rift, the distortions intensified. Unlike their entry point, this tear seemed less stable, its edges fluctuating wildly. The Collector's influence is weaker here, Loki observed, consulting the prism of pathways which pulsed with warning light. This doorway may not hold long enough for passage. We just need a quick look. Luffy insisted, guiding Naglfar directly toward the unstable opening. I need to see if it's really my home. The crew braced themselves as the ship's bow touched the rippling boundary of the rift. Again came the moment of sensory disconnection, though briefer this time. When reality reasserted itself, they found Naglfar floating on what appeared to be a normal ocean beneath a clear blue sky. We made it? Korg ventured uncertainly. Partially, Heimdall corrected, pointing behind them where the rift remained visible, a tear in the very air through which they could still see the chaotic dimension they had traversed. We have not fully crossed the threshold. Naglfar exists simultaneously in both realms at present. Luffy barely heard the explanation. His attention was fixed forward, where in the distance rose a familiar mountain. That's Dawn Island, he exclaimed, voice cracking with emotion. That's where I grew up. We're really here. Indeed, the coastline before them matched Luffy's occasional descriptions of his childhood home, the distinctive shape of empty Kolubo rising above forest that gave way to what must be Fusha village along the shore. It appears we have found your point of origin, Thor confirmed, pleased by his brother's obvious joy. Can we go closer? Luffy pleaded. I just want to see if everyone's okay. Before anyone could respond, Heimdall stiffened, his golden gaze piercing the distance. We are not alone. 2 vessels approach from the east, and they do not appear friendly. They turn to see a pair of ships sailing toward them with clear purpose. Unlike Naglfar's ornate Asgardian design, these vessels bore a distinctly military aspect, with the word Marine emblazoned on their sails. Marines. Luffy identified them, his expression shifting to wariness. Government forces from my world. They hunt pirates. And they've spotted us, Brunhilde warned, pointing to where the marine vessels had changed course to intercept them. They cannot be permitted to discover the rift, Heimdall stated firmly. The consequences for both realms could be catastrophic. We should withdraw, Thor advised. Return through the rift before they reach us. Luffy's hands tightened on the wheel, conflict evident in his expression. After 3 years away, home lay just within reach, and yet the mission's importance couldn't be ignored. He began, then straightened as resolution firmed. You're right. We can't risk it. Not with Hela threatening both worlds. This mature decision surprised even Loki, who had expected more resistance. Luffy turned the wheel, guiding Naglfar back toward the fluctuating rift. Wait, Heimdall's voice cut through their retreat preparations. Something else approaches. From within the rift itself. All eyes turned to the dimensional tear, which had begun to pulse with ominous energy. The chaotic landscape beyond seemed to darken, shadows deepening, coalescing into forms that moved with purpose. That doesn't look friendly, Korg observed nervously. It isn't, Heimdall confirmed grimly. Hela's influence reaches through. She has found this pathway. As if summoned by his words, dark shapes began to emerge from the rift, skeletal warriors with glowing green eyes, riding nightmarish steeds that seemed partly alive and partly constructed from necromantic energy. The vanguard of Hellas' army, Thor identified them, reaching for Mjolnir. The dead who serve the goddess of death. They must not reach this world, Loki declared, green energy already gathering around his hands. The mortals here have no defense against such forces. Then we stop them. Luffy declared, spinning the wheel to position Naglfar broadside to the emerging threat. Korg. Ready the weapons. On it, Captain. The Kronan warrior activated Naglfar's enchanted armaments, which hummed with building power. The first wave of undead warriors emerged fully from the rift, their hollow eyes fixing immediately on Naglfar. Behind them, more shapes gathered in the dimensional tear, an army preparing to invade. They seek to establish a beachhead in this realm, Heimdall warned. If Hellas forces gain a foothold, both worlds will be at risk. Not happening. Luffy declared. This is my home. Thor. Light em up. Thor needed no further encouragement. With a mighty swing of Mjolnir, he summoned a devastating lightning barrage that tore through the front line of skeletal warriors, scattering them like burning leaves. The battle erupted in earnest. Undead forces poured from the rift in growing numbers while Naglfar's crew fought desperately to contain them. Brunhilde's Dragonfang blade cleaved through necromantic warriors with brutal efficiency. Sif and Korg manned Naglfar's weapons, unleashing barrages of enchanted projectiles that exploded among the enemy ranks. Loki's magic created phantom duplicates of Naglfar that confused the undead forces, while Heimdall's all-seeing gaze directed their defenses to where they would be most effective. Through it all, Luffy fought with the passionate fury of one defending his homeland. His rubber powers, honed by years of Asgardian training, devastated the skeletal ranks. Gum Gum Thor's hammer, he shouted, combining a stretched arm attack with a crackling charge of electricity learned from his adopted brother. The resulting impact obliterated a dozen undead warriors simultaneously. But for each enemy they defeated, more emerged from the widening rift. The tear in reality grew larger as Hellas' influence strengthened, the dimensional barrier weakening under her assault. We cannot contain them indefinitely. Thor called out as he smashed another group of attackers with Mjolnir. The rift grows more unstable by the minute. Luffy gritted his teeth, torn between protecting his original home and preventing a catastrophic collapse of reality itself. The Marines had drawn closer now, close enough to witness the impossible battle unfolding, undead warriors fighting against beings wielding powers beyond their world's understanding. We need to close the rift. Loki shouted over the chaos. Or at least force Hellas minions back through it. Luffy's eyes narrowed as an idea formed. Can we create a big enough explosion to push them all back and damage the rift? Possibly, Thor considered, but we would need to concentrate our attacks precisely at the rift's center while simultaneously dealing with these warriors. I'll handle the warriors, Luffy decided, unwinding the thread of binding from his waist. The golden cord gleamed with power as he held it. Everyone else focus on hitting the rift when I give the signal. Without waiting for agreement, Luffy launched himself high into the air, stretching his arms to impossible length. At the apex of his jump, he began to spin the thread of binding above his head like a lasso, the enchanted cord extending and multiplying as it responded to his will. Gum Gum binding net, he shouted, releasing the thread which expanded into a vast golden web that descended over the undead horde. Where it touched Hellas warriors, it contracted instantly, binding dozens of them together in unbreakable restraints. Now! Luffy called as he fell back toward Naglfar. Hit the rift with everything. Thor didn't hesitate. With his new vambraces amplifying his power, he unleashed a concentrated lightning strike directly at the center of the dimensional tear. Simultaneously, Loki focused the prism of pathways, which projected a beam of pure magical force along the same trajectory. Korg fired all of Naglfar's weapons at once, while Brunhilde and Sif launched enchanted projectiles provided by Odin for the mission. Heimdall unsheathed Hofund, his mighty sword channeling the energy of the Bifrost in a final, devastating attack. The combined assault struck the rift with catastrophic force. A blinding flash engulfed the area as the energies converged, followed by a shockwave that sent Naglfar skidding backwards across the water's surface. The bound undead warriors were hurled back through the tear, which began to collapse in on itself, edges sealing like a wound healing in reverse. When the light faded and they could see again, the rift had shrunk to a fraction of its former size, still present, but no longer large enough for Hellas' forces to pass through. Did we do it? Korg asked cautiously. Temporarily, Heimdall replied, his golden gaze fixed on the diminished tier. We have forced Hellas' vanguard back and damaged the passage, but not sealed it completely. And there's another problem. Sif pointed toward the approaching marine vessels, which had witnessed the entire supernatural battle. They've seen too much, Thor realized grimly. Not just them, Loki added, gesturing toward the distant shore where figures had gathered, drawn by the spectacular light show of their combined attack. This entire region has witnessed powers beyond their understanding. Luffy retrieved the thread of binding, which returned to its original form as he wrapped it around his waist. His expression was uncharacteristically serious as he assessed the situation. We need to leave, he said finally. Before we cause more problems for my old home. Agreed, Thor placed a hand on his shoulder. But Luffy, the rift remains partially open. We've only bought time, not victory. And I doubt this is the only breach Hela is targeting, Loki added. This was merely the first she found. Then we need to find out where else she's trying to break through, Luffy decided, taking the wheel again. And stop her before she ruins both our worlds. As he guided Naglfar back toward the diminished rift, Luffy cast one final, longing look at Dawn Island, so close yet unreachable for now. The marine vessels had changed course to intercept them, but they would be gone before contact. I'll be back, he promised quietly. When both worlds are safe. Naglfar slipped through the damaged rift, which sealed further behind them, leaving only the barest tear in reality, visible as a slight shimmer in the air to those who knew what to look for. They emerged back into the chaotic dimension between realms, but found it dramatically changed. The once colorful sea of possibility had darkened, currents of energy flowing with new purpose toward distant points of light that Heimdall identified as other rifts. Hela's influence spreads, he observed grimly. She reaches for multiple breaches simultaneously. Can you determine which is her primary target? Thor asked. Heimdall's golden gaze swept the impossible landscape, focusing on the energy currents. There, he pointed to where the darkest flow converged on a distant rift that pulsed with malevolent green light. That breach leads directly to the borders of Helheim. It is her main focus. Then that's where we go. Luffy declared, already adjusting their course. Wait, Loki cautioned. We should consider our approach carefully. If that rift truly borders Helheim, Hela will have concentrated her forces there. He's right, Thor agreed. We barely repelled her vanguard. Her main army would overwhelm even Naglfar. Luffy frowned, considering this. So we need help. More ships, more fighters. Asgard's forces could not reach this place without the Bifrost, Thor pointed out. And Father must remain to guard the realm. A slow grin spread across Luffy's face. Who said anything about Asgard? There's someone else who knows these waters. Understanding dawned on Thor's face. Njord. Exactly. Luffy bounced excitedly. He gave me that apple thing that helps me understand the sea, right? This is just a different kind of sea. He might know how to navigate it better than anyone. It's not actually the worst idea, Loki admitted reluctantly. Njord is primordial, his understanding of cosmic waters likely extends beyond Asgard's physical seas. But how do we contact him in this place? Sif asked pragmatically. I call him. Luffy replied as if it were obvious. He bounded to Naglfar's bow, standing atop the lion figurehead. Hey, old Sa beard, he bellowed into the cosmic void. We need your help. There's a death goddess messing with your seas. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chaotic currents around them shifted, swirling into a familiar pattern, a whirlpool forming in the very fabric of interdimensional space. That actually worked. Loki seemed genuinely astonished. The cosmic whirlpool grew, its center darkening before erupting upward in a column of energy that coalesced into Njord's massive form, not made of water this time, but of the raw medium of the space between realms itself. Rubber Prince, Njord's voice reverberated through the dimensional void. You sail where no mortal vessel should tread. Yeah, well, we've got a problem. Luffy replied, unfazed by the sea god's spectacular entrance. Hela's trying to break through rifts and attack both Asgard and my home world. Njord's cosmic form shifted, his expression darkening as he observed the currents flowing toward the distant rifts. I have felt the disturbance. The cosmic seas rebel against unnatural influence. Then help us stop her. Luffy pleaded. You're the sea god. This weird space between worlds is kind of like a sea, right? Can't you control it? Njord seemed taken aback by Luffy's straightforward logic. The void between realms is not merely a sea, young captain. It is the primordial medium from which all reality flows. Even my dominion has limits here. But you can help, Thor interjected, stepping forward. Your understanding of cosmic currents far exceeds our own. Njord considered this, his massive form rippling with contemplation. Perhaps. The goddess of death disrupts the natural order, this concerns me as much as it does Asgard. Great. Luffy clapped his hands decisively. So you'll help us kick her but back to wherever she's supposed to stay. Despite the gravity of the situation, Njord's cosmic features formed what might have been amusement. Your directness remains refreshing, Rubber Prince. Very well. I shall lend my power to your cause, but be warned. Hela's strength in her domain rivals Odin himself. We don't need to beat her, Luffy replied with surprising strategic clarity. We just need to stop her from breaking through the rifts and messing up our worlds. Njord nodded, impressed by this assessment. Wisdom from the impetuous one. Surprising. His form expanded, merging partially with the cosmic currents around them. I cannot directly intervene in Hela's domain, but I can guide you there and strengthen your vessel against the forces you will encounter. Energy flowed from the sea god's cosmic form, suffusing Naglfar's hull with new power. The ship seemed to grow more substantial, more real amid the chaotic unreality of their surroundings. Follow the path I create, Njord instructed, gesturing toward the distant rift where Hela's influence converged. A clear channel formed through the chaos, a stable route amid the shifting currents. This will lead you to the boundary of Helheim. Beyond that, I cannot assist you directly. That's more than enough. Luffy assured him. We'll handle the rest. One more question, Thor interjected. The rifts themselves, can they be permanently sealed? Njord's cosmic expression grew somber. Not easily. They are symptoms of a deeper disturbance in the cosmic order. Something or someone has deliberately weakened the barriers between realms. Hela. Loki suggested. Perhaps. Or another whose interests align with the weakening of dimensional boundaries. Njord's gaze shifted meaningfully toward a different section of the void, where subtle distortion suggested another presence watching from afar. The collector, Heimdall identified the distant observer. He continues to monitor our progress. What's his game in all this? Brunhilde asked with characteristic directness. Collectors seek to possess the rare and unique, Njord replied. Perhaps he sees opportunity in the chaos of collapsing realities. Or perhaps he specifically wants something, or someone, that the rifts make accessible, Loki added, glancing meaningfully at Luffy. He still can't have me. Luffy declared emphatically. I've got pirate business to finish. Indeed, Njord's cosmic form began to dissipate back into the surrounding medium. Follow my path, Captain of Naglfar. The fate of multiple realms rests upon your success. As he faded, his final words echoed through the void, "Remember what you learned of the SEA, respect ITS power, but never fear ITS depths." With that cryptic advice, the sea god vanished, leaving only the stable channel he had created leading toward Hellas Rift. "Well, that was surprisingly helpful," Loki remarked. "Though I notice he's sending us to face Hela rather than confronting her himself." "Gods rarely fight each other's battles directly," Thor replied. "The consequences tend to be cosmic in scale. Doesn't matter. We've got a path now." Luffy returned to the helm, guiding Naglfar into Njord's channel with confidence. Next stop, Death Goddess butt kicking. As they sailed the stable route through the chaotic dimension, the crew prepared for the confrontation ahead. Thor and Loki checked their weapons and magical defenses. Sif, Brunhilde, and Korg readied Naglfar's armaments. Heimdall maintained his vigilant watch, tracking both Hellas' activities and the Collector's distant observation. "The rift grows larger as we approach," he warned as the pulsing green tear in reality loomed before them. "Hellas' power flows through it in greater measure. Can you see what awaits on the other side?" Thor asked. "Death," Heimdall replied grimly. "An army of the fallen, gathered at the boundaries of Helheim, awaiting their queen's command to march forth." "Sounds fun," Luffy declared with his trademark inappropriate enthusiasm. "We'll just have to be stronger." As Naglfar approached the rift, subtle changes occurred in the cosmic environment around them. The chaotic medium darkened further, tendrils of green energy reaching out like grasping fingers. The temperature dropped noticeably, frost forming on Naglfar's railings despite the impossibility of such a phenomenon in the void between realms. "She knows we come," Loki observed quietly. "Good." Luffy grinned fiercely. "Saves us having to find her." The rift before them pulsed with malevolent light, expanding and contracting like the breathing of some vast, predatory organism. Unlike the previous breaches they had encountered, this one appeared deliberately formed, its edges smooth rather than ragged, its shape controlled rather than random. "This is not a natural weakness in the barrier," Heimdall confirmed. "This is a doorway being actively carved from within Helheim. Then we slam it shut in her face," Luffy declared, guiding Naglfar directly toward the ominous opening. "Everyone ready? This is gonna be our biggest fight yet." The crew braced themselves as Naglfar's bow touched the boundary of the rift. This crossing felt different from the previous transitions. Instead of disorientation, they experienced a wave of cold so profound it seemed to reach their very souls. Frost spread across Naglfar's deck, and their breath emerged as vapor despite there being no actual atmosphere. They emerged into a nightmare landscape. Helheim stretched before them, not an ocean but a vast, frozen plain where tormented souls wandered aimlessly. The sky burned green with eldritch fire that gave light but no warmth. And at the realm's edge, where the dimensional barrier had been breached, stood Hellas' army, thousands upon thousands of the dead, armed and armored for war, arranged in perfect formations awaiting the command to march. Naglfar hovered above this horrific scene, suspended in the air rather than water, Njord's modifications allowing the vessel to sail the very air of Hellas' domain. "By the 9, Thor breathed, taking in the scale of the forces gathered below. "She has been preparing this invasion for centuries." At the army's center rose a massive obsidian structure, part fortress, part doorway, constructed around the rift itself. Green energy flowed from the fortress into the dimensional tear, widening it gradually but steadily. The Gateway of Souls, Loki identified it. A construct of pure necromantic energy designed to force open the barriers between realms. "And there's our target." Luffy pointed to the structure. "We destroy that, the rift closes, and Hela stays locked up where she belongs." Before anyone could comment on the simplicity of this plan versus the overwhelming forces protecting the gateway, movement at the fortress's peak caught their attention. A tall, slender figure stepped into view, her antlered headdress silhouetted against the burning sky. "Hela," Thor growled, gripping Mjolnir tightly. Even from this distance, they could feel the goddess of death's power radiating outward like a physical force. She raised her hand, and immediately the army below shifted, countless hollow eyes turning upward toward the intruding vessel. Guys? I think she spotted us, Korg observed unnecessarily. With a gesture from Hela, the front ranks of her army launched a barrage of necromantic projectiles toward Naglfar, spears and arrows wreathed in the same sickly green energy that permeated the realm. Evasive maneuvers. Luffy shouted, spinning the wheel sharply. Naglfar responded with impossible agility, banking through the air to avoid the worst of the barrage. The few projectiles that struck her hull sizzled against the protections Njord had granted, leaving black scorch marks but failing to penetrate. We can't just dodge forever. Sif called out as another wave of attacks rose from below. We need a plan of attack. I have one. Luffy replied confidently. Thor, Loki, you guys clear us a path to that gateway thing. Heimdall, watch our backs for anything sneaky. Everyone else, keep those skeleton guys off our ship. And what will you be doing? Loki asked, already summoning his magical defenses. Luffy's grin turned feral. I'm going after the lady with the funny hat. He pointed directly at Hela, who watched their evasions with evident amusement from her fortress peak. Luffy, no. Thor grabbed his arm. Hela is too powerful, even father could only imprison her, not defeat her. Not trying to defeat her, Luffy corrected. Just need to distract her long enough for you guys to smash her gateway. Classic pirate strategy, create chaos, grab the treasure, run away laughing. Before Thor could argue further, a massive projectile, a ballista bolt the size of a tree trunk, hurtled toward Naglfar's midsection. Luffy reacted instinctively, expanding his body to enormous size and catching the bolt before it could strike the ship. Go, he shouted, hurling the projectile back toward the army below. I'll keep her attention. Just destroy that gateway. Recognizing the soundness of the strategy despite its risks, Thor nodded reluctantly. Very well. But do not engage her directly unless absolutely necessary. No promises. Luffy laughed as he bounced to Naglfar's bow. Gum Gum Rocket, he shouted, launching himself directly toward Hela's position while his crew prepared to execute their part of the hastily formed plan. Thor took command of Naglfar's offense, directing Korg to target the base of the Gateway of Souls with concentrated fire while he himself summoned devastating lightning strikes against the undead formations protecting it. Loki's magic created a protective barrier around the ship as Brunhilde and Sif repelled the spectral warriors that managed to launch themselves into the air toward Naglfar. Heimdall stood vigilant, his all-seeing gaze tracking threats from every direction while also monitoring Luffy's reckless approach toward Hela herself. Meanwhile, Luffy rocketed through the air directly at the goddess of death, who watched his approach with an expression of surprised curiosity. As he neared her position, she casually flicked her wrist, sending a barrage of manifested blades to intercept him. Gum Gum Balloon. Luffy inflated himself to massive size, the blades bouncing harmlessly off his rubber body. As he deflated back to normal, he completed his trajectory, landing on the fortress platform directly before Hela. Hi there. You must be Thor's murder sister, he greeted cheerfully, as if addressing a new acquaintance rather than an ancient goddess of death. Hela's perfect eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. And what manner of creature are you, she asked, her voice smooth and cold as ice. Not Asgardian, clearly, despite the stink of Odin's magic about you. I'm Monkey D, Luffy, he declared proudly. Pirate, Rubber Man, and Odinson. And you're trying to mess with my worlds, which is definitely not happening. Odinson? Hela's surprise turned to mocking amusement. Has the All-Father taken to adopting strays again? First Loki, now, whatever you are. She circled Luffy predatorily, studying his unusual form. How fascinating. I've never encountered a being like you in all the 9 realms. That's because I'm from way further than that. Luffy replied, turning to keep facing her. And I'm here to stop you from breaking through those rifts and hurting my homes. Hela laughed, the sound utterly devoid of warmth. Stop me? Little rubber toy, I am Hela, goddess of death, rightful ruler of Asgard. You cannot hope to. Her monologue cut off abruptly as Luffy's stretched fist slammed into her face, catching her mid-sentence. Sorry, but evil speeches are super boring, Luffy explained as Hela staggered back, more shocked than injured. Can we just fight now? Hela's expression transformed from surprise to cold fury. You dare strike the goddess of death? Green energy gathered around her hands as she manifested twin blades. Then die like the insignificant creature you are. She lunged forward with blinding speed, her blades slicing through the air where Luffy had been standing, only to find he contorted his body in an impossible manner, bending backward at a right angle without moving his feet. Missed me, he taunted, springing back upright and delivering a rapid series of punches that stretched across the space between them. Gum Gatling. Hela deflected most of the blows with her blades, but several connected, driving her back a step. Her expression showed increasing confusion at Luffy's impossible physiology. What manner of sorcery is this? She demanded. No being should move as you do. Told you, I'm a rubber man. To demonstrate, Luffy grabbed his cheek and stretched it to an absurd length. See? Devil fruit power. Taking advantage of her momentary confusion, Luffy attacked again, this time using a technique developed during his years in Asgard. Gum Mjolnir. His fist expanded to massive size while simultaneously hardening with the armament hockey he'd refined, striking Hela with thunderous force. The impact sent the goddess of death crashing through the wall of her own fortress, disappearing in a cloud of debris. But Luffy knew better than to assume victory. He used the opportunity to assess the battlefield below, where Thor, Loki, and the others were making progress toward the Gateway of Souls despite fierce resistance from Hela's army. True to his prediction, Hela emerged from the rubble moments later, her perfect appearance unmarred save for a thin trickle of dark blood at the corner of her mouth, which she wiped away with deliberate slowness. Interesting, she purred, her fury now contained beneath a mask of calculated assessment. You have power, little rubber. More than I expected from one of Odin's pet projects. I'm not a pet. Luffy protested. I'm his son. And Thor and Loki's brother. Ah yes, family, Hela spat the word like a curse. Odin's greatest lie. Let me guess, he took you in, made you feel special, all while using your strength for his own purposes. Nope. Luffy replied simply. He gave me a home when I fell through a weird space hole. Taught me cool fighting stuff. Let me build an awesome ship. Pretty great dad, actually. Hela's expression darkened. Then you know nothing of his true nature. The Odin you know is a facade, a kindly mask worn by a conqueror who built Asgard's glory on blood and death, with me as his executioner. She gestured expansively at the realm around them. This prison is my reward for serving him faithfully, for being too powerful, too reminiscent of the truth he wishes to forget. For a brief moment, Luffy's expression turned thoughtful. Maybe you're right about the old Odin. I dunno, I wasn't there. But people change. I've seen him be a good dad to Thor and Loki. And to me. He cracked his knuckles, determination returning to his features. Doesn't matter anyway. You're still trying to invade my worlds, and I won't let that happen. Hela's momentary attempt at manipulation abandoned, she summoned her full power. The air around her crackled with necromantic energy as her headdress expanded into a massive crown of antler-like blades. Then die with the rest of Odin's mistakes, she snarled, unleashing a barrage of manifested weapons that filled the air around Luffy. He dodged with the inhuman agility granted by his rubber physiology, but there were too many to avoid completely. Several blades sliced into his arms and legs, drawing blood despite his usual resistance to cutting attacks. Okay, that hurts. Luffy acknowledged, leaping behind a section of fortress wall for momentary cover. She's definitely super strong. Below, he could see Thor and the others had reached the base of the Gateway of Souls but were struggling against increasingly desperate resistance. Hela's army seemed to sense the threat to their mistress's plans and fought with renewed ferocity. Need to keep her busy longer, Luffy muttered to himself. His hand went to the thread of binding at his waist, considering its power. Wonder if this would actually hold her. Before he could formulate a new strategy, the wall protecting him exploded inward as Hela blasted through it, her hands wreathed in killing energy. Hiding, little rubber. How disappointing. She advanced on him, summoning fresh blades. I expected more from one Odin deemed worthy to call son. Not hiding. Luffy corrected, springing to his feet. Just thinking. Which, according to my brothers, I don't do enough of. He dodged another blade, feeling it slice the air inches from his face. But sometimes, thinking isn't what wins fights. He charged directly at Hela, seemingly heedless of the deadly weapons manifesting around her. Gum Gum Red Hawk. His stretched arm ignited with a combination of friction and the energy Thor had taught him to channel, becoming a blazing projectile that struck Hela squarely in the chest. The impact sent her flying backwards again, genuine pain registering on her face for the first time. She crashed through multiple walls before coming to rest at the very edge of the fortress, near the pulsing energy of the Gateway of Souls. You dare! She hissed, rising to her feet with murder in her eyes. You insignificant speck of mortality. Yeah, scary death threats, I get it, Luffy interrupted, pursuing his advantage. He unwound the thread of binding from his waist, the golden cord gleaming with power. But I've got a present from your dad. He swung the thread in a wide arc, infusing it with his own will as Odin had instructed. The enchanted cord responded, extending and multiplying as it flew toward Hela with unerring precision. The goddess of death recognized the artifact instantly, her eyes widening in genuine alarm. The Gleipnir. Impossible. She attempted to dodge, but the thread seemed to anticipate her movements, wrapping around her arms and torso with living intelligence. Got you. Luffy crowed triumphantly as the binding tightened. Now stay put while my brothers wreck your door thing. Hela struggled against the bindings, her face contorted with fury and disbelief. You think Odin's trinket can hold me? In my own realm? Power gathered around her, the very atmosphere of Helheim responding to its mistress's rage. Below, Thor and Loki had combined their attacks against the Gateway of Souls, lightning and magic striking its foundations simultaneously. Fractures appeared in the obsidian structure as Naglfar provided covering fire from above, Korg and the others keeping Hela's forces at bay just long enough. It's working. Luffy shouted encouragingly, maintaining his grip on the thread of binding despite Hela's increasingly violent struggles. Just a little more. The gateway began to collapse, green energy spilling outward in chaotic bursts as its carefully constructed matrix failed. The rift it had been expanding flickered and contracted, the doorway Hela had been creating slowly sealing itself. No. The goddess of death's rage erupted in a wave of necromantic force that shattered the thread of binding despite its supposedly unbreakable nature. The backlash sent Luffy flying across the fortress platform, crashing painfully against the far wall. Free of her restraints, Hela rose into the air, power radiating from her in palpable waves. You will all die for this interference. She declared, summoning a storm of blades above her head, poised to annihilate Naglfar and everyone aboard. Luffy struggled to his feet, his body battered but his determination unbroken. Not today, Hat Lady, he shouted, charging toward her with reckless courage. Gum Gum. Before he could launch his attack, the air between them tore. A new rift appeared, different from the others, its edges precise and controlled, its interior showing not chaotic void but a meticulously organized collection of artifacts and specimens. From this unexpected breach emerged a beam of energy that struck Hela directly, encasing her in a containment field of advanced technology merged with elements of magic. The goddess of death froze mid-gesture, her expression locked in surprise and fury. What the, Luffy skidded to a halt, equally shocked by this development. A slender figure stepped through the rift, white-haired, with pale skin and an immaculate appearance despite the chaos around him. He surveyed the scene with the calculated interest of a connoisseur examining potential acquisitions. "The collector," Heimdall's voice rang out in warning from Naglfar below. "Indeed," Tannelier Tyvan acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. "Your confrontation provided the perfect opportunity to acquire a truly unique specimen. The goddess of death herself, the crown jewel of my collection." He turned his attention to Luffy, studying him with unnerving intensity. "Though you, rubber being, remain almost as intriguing. A creature from beyond the known dimensional spectrum, with properties unseen in our reality. You've been watching us," Luffy realized. "Keeping those rift things open." "Observing," the collector corrected pedantically. "And yes, stabilizing certain rifts to better evaluate potential acquisitions. Your journey between realms has been most educational." Below them, the gateway of souls collapsed completely, the rift it had been expanding sealing with a final burst of energy. Hela's army, without their queen's direct command, fell into disarray. "You can't just collect people," Luffy protested, addressing the collector while keeping a wary eye on the still immobilized Hela. "She's super evil, but she's still a person. And you definitely can't collect me, I've got pirate stuff to do." The collector's thin lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Everything unique deserves preservation. The rubber man who travels between dimensions. The death goddess who breaks reality's barriers. Such specimens must be studied, protected from the ravages of time and change." "That's messed up," Luffy declared. By now, Naglfar had risen to hover near the fortress platform, the rest of the crew witnessing this unexpected confrontation. "Tyvan," Thor called out, Mjolnir crackling with barely contained lightning. "Release Hela to our custody. She must be properly imprisoned by Asgardian magic, not added to your collection." "And why would I relinquish such a prize?" the collector asked mildly. "Particularly when I was moments from acquiring a second." His gaze returned to Luffy with unmistakable acquisitive intent. "Because neither of us is going anywhere with you, creep," Luffy declared, taking a fighting stance. "And if you try, you'll have to deal with all of us." The collector assessed the situation, Thor with Mjolnir raised, Loki's hands glowing with spell energy, Heimdall's golden sword pointed directly at him, and the battered but unbowed Luffy preparing for another round of combat. "Perhaps, a compromise," he suggested smoothly. "I retain the goddess of death, removing a threat to multiple realms in the process, and you, fascinating rubber being, remain free to continue your pirate activities." "No deal," Luffy replied instantly. "Find something else to collect. Like stamps or rocks or something." An impasse, then, the collector sighed with theatrical disappointment. "Most unfortunate. I had hoped to avoid unpleasantness." With a gesture, he expanded the containment field around Hela, preparing to draw her back through his rift. Simultaneously, a second field began to form around Luffy, who leapt away with alarm. "Thor!" Luffy called out. "Hit her prison thing with lightning. Maximum power." Understanding dawned on Thor's face. He raised Mjolnir, channeling every ounce of his power into a single, devastating lightning bolt that struck the containment field surrounding Hela. The collector's technology, advanced as it was, hadn't been designed to contain both Hela's necromantic energy and Thor's lightning simultaneously. The field fluctuated, destabilizing as the competing energies fought for dominance. Hela, sensing the weakness, added her own power to the mix. The containment shattered in a spectacular explosion that sent everyone staggering. Free but weakened, the goddess of death immediately summoned a portal back to the depths of her realm rather than continuing a fight she now seemed unlikely to win. Another time, sons of Odin, she spat as she backed toward her escape route. "And as for you, collector," her eyes narrowed dangerously, "attempt to cage me again, and I will ensure you join my realm permanently." With that threat delivered, she vanished into the portal, which sealed behind her. The collector's perfect composure finally cracked, frustration evident in his expression. Most disappointing. Two unique specimens, both lost. His gaze settled on Luffy again. Though perhaps not permanently. Yeah, not happening, Luffy replied firmly. Thanks for helping with Hela, but we're leaving now, and I'm definitely not joining your weird collection. The boy speaks for all of us, Thor added, Mjolnir still crackling with power. Depart, Tyven. You'll claim no prizes here today. The collector studied them a moment longer, calculating odds that apparently didn't favor him. Another time, perhaps. The multiverse is vast, but paths have a curious way of crossing repeatedly. With that cryptic remark, he stepped backward through his precisely formed rift, which sealed seamlessly behind him, leaving them alone on the rapidly deteriorating fortress platform. Well, that was weird, Luffy observed eloquently. But hey, we won. Kinda. Hela retreated and the gateway is destroyed, Thor agreed. Though I doubt we've seen the last of either threat. The rifts are stabilizing, Heimdall reported from Naglfar's deck. With both Hela and the collector's influence removed, the natural order reasserts itself. Then our mission is accomplished, at least for now, Loki concluded. Though father will be disappointed to learn his precious thread of binding proved inadequate. It worked long enough. Luffy protested, leaping across to land on Naglfar's deck. We stopped the invasion, closed the big rifts, and nobody got collected. I call that a total victory. As if punctuating his declaration, the fortress beneath them gave an ominous rumble, beginning to collapse without Hela's power maintaining it. Time to leave, Thor decided, the rest of the crew needing no encouragement to agree. Luffy took the helm, guiding Naglfar away from the crumbling structure and toward the rapidly shrinking exit rift that would take them back to the space between realms. They slipped through just as Hela's fortress collapsed entirely, returning to the chaotic dimensional void which already appeared lighter and more stable than before. The cosmic currents restore themselves, Heimdall observed as they sailed through the now calming medium. The natural barriers between realms strengthen once more. So no more worrying about Hela popping up in Asgard or my world? Luffy asked hopefully. For now, at least, Thor replied. Though eternal vigilance remains necessary. And the collector will certainly try again to add you to his menagerie, Loki added helpfully. He's nothing if not persistent. Let him try. Luffy declared confidently. No one's gonna stop me from becoming Pirate King. Not death goddesses, not weird collector guys, not even cosmic space holes. As they navigated back toward Asgard, the crew finally allowed themselves to relax slightly, tending to wounds and repairing what damage they could to Naglfar's battle-scarred hull. One thing still bothers me, Thor mused as they sailed the increasingly stable cosmic sea. The rifts began appearing shortly after Luffy's arrival. That seems unlikely to be mere coincidence. Perhaps his passage weakened the barriers somehow, Loki suggested. A dimensional resonance effect. Or perhaps, Heimdall interjected, his golden gaze distant, his arrival was never accident but necessity, the realms themselves drawing together one who could help preserve them. Luffy, overhearing this, laughed. You guys think too much. Sometimes weird stuff just happens. Like eating a devil fruit or falling through sky holes or finding awesome pirate treasures. Your philosophical depth remains unparalleled, brother, Loki remarked dryly. They continued their journey in companionable banter, Naglfar's course steady toward home. As they approached Asgard's realm, Luffy grew quieter, his gaze occasionally turning back toward the distant section of cosmic sea where they had briefly glimpsed his original world. You're thinking of home, Sif observed, joining him at the helm. It wasn't a question. Both of them, Luffy admitted. I want to go back someday, find my crew, become Pirate King. But... He gestured at Naglfar, at his adoptive brothers, at the Golden Realm coming into view. This is home too now. Then perhaps you need not choose permanently, she suggested. With Naglfar's abilities and your connection to both realms, maybe someday you can bridge the worlds rather than abandoning either. Luffy's face brightened at this possibility. You're right. I could be Pirate King and Asgardian Prince. No one's ever done that before. Certainly not, she agreed with a smile. You would be the first and only. The best kind of pirate treasure is making your own path, he declared firmly. That's what freedom really means. As Naglfar approached the rift leading back to Asgard, they could see the golden city shining in the distance, Odin and Frigga waiting at the observatory where Heimdall normally stood watch. Home, Thor said with satisfaction. For now, Luffy added with a grin. Until the next adventure. Months passed following their return from the confrontation with Hela and the Collector. The rifts between realms stabilized completely, though Heimdall maintained vigilant watch for any signs of renewed activity. Asgard celebrated the victory, adding new tales of Naglfar's journey through the very fabric of reality to the growing legend of the Rubber Prince and his extraordinary vessel. Luffy, for his part, took the entire adventure in stride. To him, sailing between dimensions seemed no more outlandish than any other exploit in his increasingly unusual life. He threw himself back into training, ship modifications, and the occasional feast with the same boundless enthusiasm that characterized everything he did. But those closest to him noticed subtle changes. He would sometimes stand at Asgard's edge, staring at the sky as if searching for invisible doorways. The straw hat he never parted with seemed to hold even greater significance, his fingers brushing it absently in quiet moments. On the 4th anniversary of his arrival in Asgard, Odin summoned Luffy to a private audience in his study rather than the formal throne room. It was a father speaking to a son, not a king to a prince. You've grown much in your time here, Odin observed as Luffy bounced energetically around the room, examining artifacts and occasionally poking things he probably shouldn't touch. Not just in strength, but in wisdom as well, whether you recognize it or not. Thanks. Luffy replied cheerfully, picking up what appeared to be a priceless ancient orb and tossing it casually from hand to hand. I'm definitely way stronger now. Could probably punch way more bad guys than before. Odin calmly retrieved the orb before disaster could strike. Indeed. Your confrontation with Hela impressed even me. Few have faced her and lived to tell the tale. She was super strong, Luffy acknowledged. But that weird collector guy helped, even if he was creepy about it. Tannelier Tyven is dangerous in his own way, Odin cautioned. His obsession with collecting the unique places you at perpetual risk. You would do well to remain vigilant. Yeah, Loki already gave me the whole, watch your back, speech, Luffy waved dismissively. But I'm not worried. Between Naglfar and my crew, nobody's gonna stuff me in some display case. Odin's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. Your confidence remains unshaken, I see. His expression grew more serious. I have news regarding your original world, Luffy. That got Luffy's full attention immediately. He stopped bouncing and focused on Odin with unusual intensity. Heimdall has continued to observe the dimensional boundaries where we briefly glimpsed your home, Odin continued. The rifts have healed, but the connection remains, remembered, for lack of a better term. With proper preparation and power, a stable path could potentially be established. Luffy's eyes widened. You mean? I could go home? For real? Eventually, yes. Odin nodded. Though the process would not be simple or quick. It would require extensive preparation, the gathering of specific cosmic energies, and precise timing with certain celestial alignments. How long? Luffy asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. A year, perhaps more, Odin replied honestly. And the pathway would be temporary, a bridge between worlds lasting days rather than permanently connecting the realms. Luffy absorbed this information, emotions playing across his expressive face, excitement, hope, and surprisingly, conflict. I don't know what to say, he admitted finally. I've wanted to go home since I got here. To find my crew, become Pirate King, keep my promise to Shanks. He looked around the study, gesturing vaguely toward Asgard beyond its walls. But this is home too now. You guys are my family too. Odin's expression softened with genuine paternal affection. The bonds of family remain regardless of distance, my son. Thor traveled the 9 realms for centuries while still being Asgard's prince. Your path may simply extend further. So I wouldn't have to choose. I could go back but still be part of Asgard too. The bridge we create would eventually close, Odin cautioned. But Naglfar has proven capable of navigating between realms under the right circumstances. And you, Luffy, have demonstrated an uncanny knack for making the impossible possible. A slow grin spread across Luffy's face, growing until it threatened to split his head in two. So I could be Pirate King in my world and an Asgardian prince. I could find the One Piece and still come back for Thor's embarrassing coronation ceremony. I don't recall mentioning Thor's coronation being embarrassing, Odin remarked dryly. Loki says all ceremonial stuff is embarrassing, Luffy explained with perfect innocence. But I'd still come back for it. Odin sighed but couldn't entirely suppress his smile. We shall begin preparations for creating this bridge immediately. In the meantime, I suggest you continue honing your skills and preparing Naglfar for the journey. The path between worlds will not be easily traversed, even with all our preparations. Awesome! Luffy bounced excitedly. I'll tell Thor and Loki and Sif and everyone. We can start planning right away. Before Odin could respond, Luffy had launched himself across the room in a rubbery blur, wrapping extensible arms around the All-Father in an enthusiastic hug that would have scandalized the court had any witnessed it. Thank you, Luffy said simply. For everything. Being a good dad and helping me get home and building me an awesome ship and making me stronger. Momentarily taken aback by this uncharacteristic display of sentiment, Odin awkwardly returned the embrace. You have brought much to Asgard as well, Luffy. Your presence has changed us. For the better, I believe. Luffy released him and bounded toward the door, already calling for Thor and Loki at the top of his lungs before he'd even left the room. Odin shook his head in fond exasperation as the Rubber Prince's excited voice echoed down the hallway, undoubtedly disturbing whatever dignified activities might have been occurring. Some things, it seemed, would never change, regardless of which realm Luffy occupied. The day of departure arrived precisely 13 months later. Asgard had been transformed by preparations for the event, the Bifrost Observatory expanded with additional equipment, cosmic energy harvested from specific celestial alignments, and Naglfar herself enhanced with new enchantments specifically designed for interdimensional travel. The ship floated at the edge of Asgard, her hull gleaming with fresh paint and reinforcements, the lion figurehead roaring proudly toward the horizon where a controlled rift would soon open. Her sails bore both the symbol of Asgard and Luffy's personal mark, the skull wearing a straw hat that had become known throughout the realm as the emblem of the Rubber Prince. A crowd had gathered to witness the departure, the entirety of Asgard's court and many common citizens as well. For all his eccentric ways, Luffy had become beloved during his years among them, his infectious enthusiasm and straightforward courage winning over even the most tradition-bound Asgardians. Thor and Loki stood with their parents on the ceremonial platform, watching as Luffy bounced around Naglfar's deck, directing last-minute preparations with his unique combination of excitement and chaos. He appears ready, Frigga observed with a gentle smile. Though I suspect no amount of preparation truly suffices for such a journey. Luffy thrives on unpredictability, Thor replied fondly. The less certain the path, the more he enjoys walking it. A philosophy that continues to baffle reason, Loki remarked, though without his usual sarcasm. He too had grown fond of his rubber brother, though he would rarely admit it directly. The preparations are complete, Heimdall announced, approaching the royal family. The celestial alignment reaches its peak within the hour. The path between realms will open as planned. Then it is time, Odin declared, leading the way to where Naglfar awaited. The crew had assembled on deck, not just Sif, Brunhilde, and Korg, who had accompanied Luffy on many adventures, but new additions as well. Warriors of Asgard who had volunteered to join this unprecedented journey, scholars eager to document a realm beyond the Nine, and even Jord's representative, a sea nymph tasked with maintaining the ship's enchantments in strange waters. Luffy stood at the bow, dressed in a unique blend of his original clothing style and Asgardian elements, his red vest reinforced with light golden armor, his treasured straw hat secured firmly on his head, and around his waist, a new thread of binding gifted by Odin to replace the one broken in a confrontation with Hela. "Everyone ready," he called out, bouncing with barely contained excitement. "This is gonna be the best adventure ever." The crew responded with enthusiastic affirmation, their confidence in their captain evident despite the unprecedented nature of their journey. As the royal family approached the gangplank, Luffy stretched his arms to impossible length, grabbing the railing and catapulting himself over to land before them with his typical lack of ceremony. "So this is it," Thor said, clasping Luffy's shoulder firmly. "My brother sets forth to conquer a new world." "Not conquer," Luffy corrected immediately. "Explore. Adventure. Find my crew and become Pirate King." He grinned widely. "And then come back with awesome stories and treasures." "See that you do," Thor replied with a matching grin. "Asgard will seem dull without your chaos energizing its halls. I've left Loki for that." Luffy laughed, dodging the half-hearted swipe his other brother aimed at him. "Try not to destroy your entire world within the first week of your return," Loki advised dryly. "Your unique approach to problem-solving tends toward the catastrophic. That's what makes it fun." Luffy wrapped both brothers in a stretchy-armed hug that left them momentarily breathless. "I'm gonna miss you guys. But I'll come back with my whole crew someday, and then we can have a real party." Frigga stepped forward next, embracing Luffy with maternal warmth. "Be safe, my son. Remember that you always have a home here." "Thanks, Mom," Luffy replied softly, the familial term coming naturally after years in their household. Finally, Odin approached. Instead of words, he placed his hands on Luffy's shoulders, his single eye studying the young man who had literally fallen into their lives 4 years earlier. The scrawny 17-year-old had grown into a formidable 21-year-old warrior who combined the rubber powers of his origin with the combat prowess of Asgard. "You have made me proud, Luffy Odinson," he said simply. "Remember all you have learned here, but never lose the spirit that makes you uniquely yourself." "I will," Luffy promised solemnly, before his serious expression cracked into his trademark grin. "And I'll make you even prouder when I become Pirate King." Odin nodded, a rare smile softening his features. "Of that, I have no doubt." With final farewells complete, Luffy bounded back aboard Naglfar, taking his position at the helm. The crew prepared for departure as Heimdall moved to the expanded observatory, preparing to activate the bridge between worlds. "Citizens of Asgard." Odin's voice rang out to the assembled crowd. "Today we witness a historic journey, the voyage of Naglfar beyond the 9 realms, captained by my son, Prince Luffy." Cheers erupted from the gathering, many raising weapons or cups in salute. When the Norns delivered him to our shores 4 years ago, none could have predicted the impact he would have on our realm. Today, he returns to his original world not just as the rubber warrior who fell from the sky, but as a prince of Asgard, carrying our knowledge, our strength, and our love with him. More cheers followed, growing louder as Heimdall activated the observatory's mechanisms. Energy began to gather at Asgard's edge, coalescing into a swirling vortex of light and color, not the rainbow hues of the Bifrost, but a deeper, more fundamental energy that spoke of cosmic barriers thinning. "The path opens," Heimdall announced. "It will remain stable for approximately 3 days of Asgardian time, then close until the next alignment." "That's our cue," Luffy called out excitedly. "Cast off. Adventure awaits." Naglfar's enchanted ropes untied themselves, the gangplank withdrawing as the ship prepared to depart. The sails unfurled, catching not just wind but the cosmic energies gathering around them. Remember, Luffy. Odin called out as the ship began to move. The bridge will reopen in exactly 1 Asgardian year. Return then if you wish to maintain the connection between our worlds. I'll be there. Luffy promised, waving enthusiastically from the helm. With my whole crew and amazing stories. Naglfar pulled away from Asgard's edge with gathering speed, the lion figurehead roaring as if excited for the journey ahead. The dimensional vortex loomed before them, a controlled version of the rifts they had navigated before, stable, directed, and keyed specifically to the frequency of Luffy's home world. Thank you everyone. Luffy's voice carried back across the diminishing distance. For being my family. For the awesome ship. For everything. With a final wave, he turned his attention forward, guiding Naglfar directly into the swirling vortex. The ship entered the dimensional passage with a flash of light that momentarily blinded the observers. When vision cleared, Naglfar had vanished, the vortex itself contracting to a mere pinpoint of light that would remain as a marker until the bridge reopened. And so he returns to fulfill his destiny, Frigga murmured, taking Odin's hand. While remaining connected to ours, Odin agreed. A prince of 2 worlds. Thor gazed at the distant point of light that marked his brother's passage. He will succeed, you know. Whatever this Pirate King title truly entails, Luffy will achieve it. Of that, I have no doubt, Loki agreed with unusual sincerity. Our rubber brother has a peculiar habit of accomplishing exactly what he sets his mind to, regardless of how impossible it seems. As the crowds dispersed and the royal family returned to the palace, the tiny light of the dimensional marker continued to shine at Asgard's edge, a promise of return, of adventures yet to come, of worlds connected by the indomitable spirit of a rubber prince with dreams as vast as the cosmos itself. Somewhere in the east blue, fishermen looked up in wonder as the sky briefly distorted, a flash of light momentarily outshining the sun. From this impossibility emerged a vessel unlike any seen in their waters, golden and massive, with a fierce lion figurehead and sails bearing the mark of a straw-hatted skull. The strange ship settled onto the waves with unnatural grace, seeming to harmonize with the sea itself as it found its place in this new world. On its deck stood a young man in a straw hat, his arms stretched wide to embrace the familiar horizon, his face split in a grin of pure joy. I'm back. Monkey D. Luffy, Asgardian prince and future pirate king, declared to the waiting world. And this time, I've got the greatest pirate ship ever built. Behind him, his Asgardian crew prepared for their first adventure in this strange new realm, ready to help their captain fulfill his destiny while forging legends of their own. Naglfar's sails caught the wind, carrying the extraordinary vessel forward into waters ripe with possibility. The ultimate pirate adventure had only just begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.